Apologies for absence. Could I invite Debbie Vaughan, please, to present any apologies for absence today?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Liz Fairhurst, Rob McCatter, Stephen Reid, and Michael Thierry and Ryan Brent, and also from Honorary Alderman Chris Carter and Robin McIntosh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those apologies. Are there any other apologies that anyone wishes to note? Councillor House.
Yeah, just apologies for lateness from Adrian Collett.
Thank you very much. That's noted. Any further apologies to be received? Thank you. We will then proceed with item 2 on the agenda, which is the declaration of interest. This may be boring for members to sit through time and time again, but it is a procedure that we have to comply with. So I do need to remind all members who believe they have a disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter to be considered at the meeting that you must declare an interest and, having regard to Part 3, Paragraph 1.5 of the County Council Members' Code of Conduct, you must leave the meeting while the matter is being discussed, save for exercising any right to speak in accordance with Paragraph 1.6 of the Code. Furthermore, all members with a personal interest in the matter being considered at the meeting should consider having regard to Part 5, Paragraph 4 of the Code, whether such interest should be declared, and having regard to Part 5, Paragraph 5 of the Code, consider whether it is appropriate to leave the meeting while the matter is discussed, save for exercising any right you may wish to have to speak in accordance with the Code. So members, you have again been reminded of that requirement. That takes us on to item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. Again, these have been circulated some time in advance. No inaccuracies have been brought to my attention. So, members, am I correct in assuming that you are willing to accept and agree that these are a true and accurate record? Thank you. I will now sign the minute. Item 4 on your agenda will show that there is a deputation this morning. There is one deputation, and I'm going to invite Kate Klarfelt, and I understand that Kate will be talking to us this morning about plastics recycling. Kate, I'd like to welcome you to the chamber, but also to remind you that you do have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Kate. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I wish to speak to Hampshire County Council about their position on plastic recycling. In November 2019, I made a deputation here on the extension of types of plastics recycled in Hampshire. Hampshire County Council was and still is only able to collect and recycle 2 types of plastic bottles because of their polymer makeup. However, plastic pots, tubs, trays, and other plastics are made from more complex polymers which cannot be successfully sorted by the MRFs, the Materials Recovery Facilities, currently operated in Hampshire. I had brief correspondence with some of the councillors after my deputation, but soon after, the pandemic broke out, and matters such as this understandably slipped down the priority list. At the time, my concern was that nearby local authorities, and frankly most of the country, did and continue to support the recycling of a number of different types of plastics. Hampshire's policy seemed, by comparison, antiquated and limiting. However, the reason given for only recycling certain plastic bottles remains still on the council's website. That is, it's not certain that recycled plastics in the UK are processed here and that it's dependent on the availability of profitable and stable markets to receive recycled plastics and repurpose them here in the UK. And there is a risk, therefore, that recycled waste is diverted, exported, and incinerated abroad. Indeed, in email correspondence when I raised this in 2019, this was reiterated. Quote, Hampshire is keen to ensure that no material collected for recycling ends up being exported and not recycled, and that, quote, Hampshire County Council considers the most sustainable disposal option for mixed plastics is to recover energy from them, i.e. incineration. I took objection to the fact that Hampshire was so willing to incinerate over recycle and not to keep up with the more progressive policy adopted by other councils. A few years later, and now wiser, I must admit, I agree, it's true. The exposure now given to the increase of recycling in the UK that is exported and incinerated is concerning. The Chief Exec of the Environment Agency has called for the ban of exporting British rubbish and recycling overseas. And it's also been recently reported by our government that more than half of the plastic being recycled here is exported, often to countries without the necessary infrastructure to do so. So it's dumped and burned. I give myself a pat on the back every time I rinse out a plastic milk carton and place it in the right recycling area. But maybe I shouldn't, given that I now know it's most likely going to generate emissions from being transported, sent to a country not ready to receive tons of our waste, to be burnt and emit a range of harmful gases. What else should I or we do then? Before I get onto that, I thought I would note that I was surprised in more recent correspondence with some councillors to be informed that a brand new state-of-the-art MRF, materials recovery facility, is being built in Eastleigh to open in 2025 to extend the number of plastics to be recycled in Hampshire. So please could you explain this change in tack? Is now the council's policy that it will recycle more plastics because the concerns and justification stated previously about exportation and incineration abroad are no longer issues? Are there now more viable markets for recycled materials here in the UK? I'd really appreciate some follow-up information that explains the need for a MRF for more plastic recycling, which seemingly contradicts the proposed more realistic policy that Hampshire has held for several years, that recycling outcomes are too unpredictable. To extrapolate this further, are there now clear plans in place, therefore, to reduce the use or even close down some of the incineration sites, as we're seeing elsewhere, the local sites Chinham and Marchwood? Whatever Hampshire's stance is on recycling more plastics, and in truth, the reason why I wrote to the council originally, what is being done to get to the root of the issue? Overconsumption of plastic. What is being done to increase awareness amongst Hampshire's residents on how and why they should reuse plastic, or better, reduce use of single-use plastic, i.e. the real reason why you have the need to have a MRF installed in Eastleigh? How is the council supporting residents through a range of methods of changing behaviours in the community around consumption of single-use plastic? I ask these questions because other authorities are proactively doing much, much more to support the education and awareness around this. Again, in my recent correspondence on this, I was pointed to a webpage that outlined a few ways in which Hampshire residents can reduce plastic use, which is a start, but it provides very high-level guidance. One of the points actually discourages the use of compostable or biodegradable packaging because it can't be recycled in Hampshire currently. So it's not really guidance on reduction of plastics consumption, no actual examples of alternative products, where to buy, how to use. I was also pointed to a Hampshire Recycles webpage, which I was told had information about plastic usage. It has a short video on the process of recycling, how recycling is sorted after it's been disposed, but again, nothing on how to consider alternatives to any recycled items, including plastic, or how to reuse them. And I am sorry to say that I never came across these websites in my extensive researching, only when I was emailed these links directly. So perhaps more of a push campaign could be done here. Regardless, web pages are part of the solution because they are a passive means of educating residents. Meanwhile, there are some exciting and innovative ways in which other councils are actively going out engaging their inhabitants on this, which we could learn from. Take Durham County Council. They launched a recycling communications and education project for all residents to embrace recycling, elevate the quality of plastics recycling through household collection, and also on how to reduce and reuse plastic or consider plastic alternatives. The project includes video content, school engagement, school competitions, talks in large supermarkets, guidance promoted online for residents, small businesses, large businesses, all on the movement to use less plastic, or if necessary, how to best recycle. It's a wide-reaching, comprehensive, and all-inclusive campaign and movement which embraces the fact that not everyone finds it easy to understand and embrace these habits. And certain factors such as age, ability, and living circumstances can be an obstacle. Dorset County Council has a single-use plastic action plan where they plan to raise awareness and promote positive initiatives for residents. Similarly, in Manchester, they took part in a plastic-free July. To eradicate avoidable single-use plastics, but also launched a big campaign, In the Loop, where there are educational videos and content on how to repair, reuse, and consider alternatives to plastics and other materials. The videos are really accessible and reach different audiences, young adults, elderly, children. This summer, Somerset Council pushed the movement to go single-use plastic-free and asked residents to be part of the solution. Solutions such as how to find free-to-use water stations for reusable bottles and many more initiatives. This was very much promoted as a solution in tandem with recycling. Hertford County Council has a large campaign on Remember Your Reusables. Bags, cups, bottles, providing materials for schools, offices, residents to advertise quick tips on how to change habits. They also, like many councils, promote shops, cafes, restaurants to sign up to refill centres, where residents can refill their bottles for free. There are institutions in Hampshire that have signed up to refill stations, but why is the council not promoting them further? And on this note, there is plenty that is being done on the initiative of Hampshire residents. In Overton, a mother started a campaign for plastic-free living with a friend that took off. There are other examples of plastic-free certified towns and villages in Hampshire promoted by residents. I did take a look to see if any city councils had taken this initiative. Winchester City Council's plastic-free website is no longer active, nor their Facebook page. I haven't touched on the challenges faced by different demographic groups in adopting these behaviours. Single-use plastic items can be essential for people with disabilities to live independently, such as straws. People may rely on online shopping and home deliveries, which is often delivered in layers of plastic packaging which isn't recyclable. Others might think that single use is the cheapest, easiest, quickest option when shopping. But what we're seeing is that elderly people, over 50s, 5s, and particularly over 70s, are the most likely to recycle and reuse in the UK. That more universally designed plastic alternatives, such as specialist glass straws, are being made for those living with disabilities, and that reusable products result in longer-term value versus upfront single-use cost. However, I've probably not lightly made my point, and that is, can the council be more proactive in educating and raising awareness about reuse, reduction of single-use plastics and use of plastic alternatives? If anything, not to overuse that new MRF. And with the opening of the new MRF, could a campaign appealing to all demographics in Hampshire through different media be promoted to support residents in looking beyond single-use plastic, or any material for that matter? To inform the campaign, could consultation across the community be conducted to understand the pain points and opportunities that residents from those demographics I just mentioned too find in considering reusable plastic alternatives?
Excuse me interrupting, would you please wind up now because you've had your 10 minutes?
I will do, thanks. But to end on a positive note, this could be an exciting, positive change and movement, and an opportunity to bring residents together to work towards a common goal. Thanks, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you very much indeed, Kate. Thank you, Kate, and thank you for keeping so closely to the time. Councillor Adams-King, do you wish to make a response?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Kate. Kate is a constituent of mine, actually, in Romsey Rural, and it's not our normal way of giving any kind of response here, but I've explained to Kate that we will be going back to her with a detailed response and also giving her some of the information that we, the things we're doing in Test Valley, as well as what Hampshire is doing as well. But points well made. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now continue with the agenda. The next item is item 5, my announcement. I've got a few short announcements to make today, and I'm delighted to be able to start with awards or accolades that have recently been granted to the staff at Hampshire County Council. Grace Osborne in Property Services recently passed her Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors Assessment of Professional Competence, and she is now a Chartered Surveyor within the Estates Management team. Grace joined the Hampshire County Council in 2021 after graduating from Reading University. That was a tough time to start her career, given the ongoing coronavirus restrictions at that time. To achieve chartered status, given this challenge, and in this time frame, is a great testament to her personal commitment and to the support and leadership from the wider team, which also includes the Young Professionals Work Network, of which Grace is an active member. Also to note by members this morning is the fact that at the end of September, the Sir Harold Hillier Gardens were awarded a Gold Award for Britain in Bloom, South and South East, Heritage and Parks 2023. It is the 10th Gold Award in a row, the 10th Gold Award in a row. And I think you will agree with me that that is an absolute fantastic achievement and very well deserved by the team at Sir Harold Hillier Gardens. It's amazing. And as the chairman, I'm sure you appreciate that calls upon my time continue to be very interesting and very varied. So today I'm only going to give you a few extracts from my diary. On the afternoon of the 5th of October, I was delighted to be able to present the staff 40-year long service awards at Searles House, whilst in the evening I attended the 25-year awards at the Great Hall. On both occasions, I met many Hampshire staff who talked very positively about their time with this council. There were lots of happy and some funny memories that were shared by staff on that day, but I do feel that such loyalty says a great deal about the calibre of the officers at Hampshire County Council. On Sunday, the 8th of October, saw me attending Winchester Cathedral for the Law Sunday service, whilst on the 27th, quite differently, I was walking around Butser Ancient Farm. I won't say in Wellington boots, because at that time I had a surgical boot on my foot, but I was stomping around Butser Ancient Farm with His Royal Highness, the Duke of Gloucester. I confess I've never visited that farm before, but it was an extremely interesting experience, given that all visitors are encouraged to engage in farm-related activities. Well, for one group of school children, that meant they got up and dirty. They loved to help making an animal pen, which was made out of mud and wattle, and they were encouraged to build the wall. Well, as you can imagine, there was mud everywhere, but there was lots of fun and there was lots of laughter. And I like to think that in there somewhere, there was a great deal of learning that took place. I accepted an invitation to attend the 30th anniversary of the Farnborough Air Sciences Trust. That was held on the 23rd of October. Now, no other single location in the world has contributed so much to aeronautical science over more than a century than Farnborough. And the Trust seeks to make available to the public the story of Farnborough's unique aviation history. If you go there, you will find on display flight simulators, Frank Whittle's jet engine, historic photograph equipment, and indeed a full-size replica of Cody's British Army aeroplane number 1A, which saw the first successful powered flight in the UK on October the 16th, 1908. And there are even wind tunnel tours. I didn't go on that, it was too cold and windy. But this would be a great family day out for anyone. More recently, on the 29th of October, I attended a festival of remembrance hosted by the Royal British Legion at the Point in Eastleigh. This, I have to say, was a very, very moving occasion, but I was especially heartened to see so many young people attending, and those young people were acting as standard bearers, and they did a fantastic job. They really did. Perhaps it is appropriate at this point in my announcements that I remind you all that it is our staff remembrance service tomorrow. The service starts at 10:55 outside the Great Hall. So I do hope those of you who are in, around or close to Winchester will come along and join with me and other members of staff. And now there's just one final announcement, but it is indeed a sad announcement. It is with much sadness that I have to record that former Honorary Alderman Alex Varden has sadly passed away. Now, I understand that Alex represented the Odium division from 1985 until his retirement in 2001. And I shall now give opportunity for anyone who might remember Alex to speak, to remind us of any memories of Alex. Councillor Glenn.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, the news about Alex is pretty recent. I feel obliged to get up because I was the one who came in not quite after him on the Odium division. There was another councillor, but when we had the boundary changes, I then came into Odium, and it's a wonderful division to represent. But I'd just like to say there won't be many of us in this chamber who actually knew Alex. So the longer we stay, the fewer we become. But he was actually a very kind councillor. He was helpful, and he was very good with newcomers coming in to the county council, explaining the ways of the working ways of the county council. He was a very effective county councillor in his division, he, not a lot of people know the fact that he very nearly became the leader. He stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party against Ken Thornber. Well, of course, we all know the result, but it was a close result, and in my opinion, he would have been a great leader of the county council. So all our best to his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Glenn is right. There probably aren't many people in the chamber who remember Alec Varden, but I certainly do. He was leader of the Conservative group on Hart District Council when I was leader of the Liberal Democrat group. And there were many occasions when we needed to have discussions on things to jointly make sure the right things happened. Other occasions when we had to negotiate with each other. And I remember one occasion when he invited me round to his house so that we could talk about the forthcoming annual meeting. And he plied me with whiskey. I have to say it was a jolly good whiskey. I rather enjoyed it, but I was conscious that I had to drive home, so I was careful how much I drank, and I've always believed it was in order to try and encourage me to be indiscreet about things that I shouldn't talk about. We didn't agree on a lot of things, but we did agree on other things. He had, in my view, a wildly right-wing view that he felt all education should be privatised. I think it was the voucher system that he was very much in favour of. And we had some quite robust debates about that and things like it. But as Jonathan has said, he was a very courteous man, a very likeable person. He used to take the mickey out of my accent. I don't know why either. But he used an exaggerated Cockney accent whenever he was speaking to me, so I think he was trying to tell me something. But there we go. It was very sad to read of his demise. You sometimes think of people you don't see for a long time and you wonder how they're getting on. And when I read that email a couple of days ago, I was genuinely sad. He will be a great loss. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. Councillor Withers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've known Alec, and my wife had known his partner for quite a few years now. And Alec and I never discuss politics. We have other outside activities. But what I would say is that his partner, who was a midwife in the Queen's Alexandra Nursing Corps with my wife and several others, have always got together every year, which gave Alex and I an opportunity to meet and greet. But I would say on his greatness as a friend, very social, likable, a lot of friends in Borden, Alton and Petersfield. Just to say now, his partner is being supported by the QA group, which is most important to see that Alec gets away with a very good sending off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Withers. Are there any more comments? Well, it's rather nice at a sad occasion like this to hear some happy memories and to be able to remember people with a very positive thought. So can I please now ask you all to stand and observe a 1-minute silence in respect of Honorary Alderman Alex Varden. Thank you, members. Right, we now continue with the agenda. We are on item 6, which is the Leader's Report. Can I now invite the Leader to present his report?
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. And you will note, Madam Chairman, there are a few things that we've done together, and some of that will be repeated, but I hope you're okay with that, Madam Chairman. First of all, on Israel and Gaza. We've all watched in horror the atrocities unfold in Israel and Gaza conflict in recent weeks, and the appalling loss of life amongst innocent citizens. Many Israeli and Palestinians have been lost. People are suffering terribly, and there is a growing humanitarian crisis. These are very distressing times, and our thoughts and prayers with all victims in this conflict and their families and loved ones, including those in Hampshire who may have family and friends in the region. Storm Ciarán. Last week, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Resilience Forum declared a major incident responding to Storm Ciarán, with strong winds, heavy rain and flooding experienced on several routes across the county, especially in coastal areas. I would like to thank the emergency services, local authorities and partner agencies for coming together to advise and support residents during the storm. I would especially like to pay tribute to the County Council teams involved in their response, including, but not limited to, our highways teams, who worked around the clock in very challenging conditions to help keep Hampshire moving and ensure road users stayed safe. Our education and inclusion officers, who informed and supported schools to ensure the safety of our pupils. Our community officers, who ensured crucial warning and information messaging were provided to residents and the general public, including vital travel and safety advice. And our frontline teams, who continue to provide valuable services and support to communities across Hampshire. The Armed Forces Covenant. Last month, I was proud and honoured to renew the Hampshire County Council's pledge to the Armed Forces Covenant, which we originally assigned back in 2011. Hampshire hosts one of the largest armed forces communities in the UK. The community includes over 60,000 people who currently serve in the regular armed forces, as well as veterans, reservists, and the spouses and children of service personnel. By renewing the Covenant Pledge in 2023, the County Council has demonstrated our continuing unwavering support and the immense gratitude to all our members of Hampshire Armed Forces community for their bravery and sacrifice in service to the United Kingdom. We take great pride in providing high-quality public services and being an excellent employer to the Armed Forces community, and we are committed to keep doing this in the years ahead. I would like to thank everyone who helped to organise last month's important and moving Covenant Renewal ceremony. I would especially like to pay tribute to Councillor Andrew Joy, our outstanding member champion for the Armed Forces, and Kate Stills, the County Council's Senior Armed Forces Programme Manager, for her brilliant work leading our partnerships with the Armed Forces. And they both really do a fantastic job representing us on Hampshire and Hampshire County Council. So a genuine thank you to Councillor Joy and Kate as well. Along with the Chairman, I am looking forward to attending the Remembrance Sunday service at Winchester Cathedral this weekend and giving thanks to Hampshire Armed Forces communities, past and present, for their invaluable service. I will also be taking part in the Staff Remembrance service tomorrow. The Chairman has previously mentioned the Long Service Awards, and I will as well, Madam Chairman, if that's okay. Hampshire County Council has a long-standing reputation as a provider of high-quality local public services. One of the main reasons we have this reputation is that we employ talented, hard-working and effective public servants. I was delighted to have the opportunity to thank some of the Hampshire's most dedicated officers at the County Council's 40-year long service celebration and also attend the 25-year long celebration as well. In a time when local government faces significant challenges, all our officers are continuing to do a brilliant job delivering excellent public services for residents and helping to make Hampshire a great place to live, work, play, and Councillor Todd, and visit, as I reminded you. I think that's payback, actually, Councillor Todd, for you not paying attention when I was reading my speech. Reading your emails. I would like to thank them and for all that they do. Care Service Proposals Consultation. Like all upper-tier authorities in England, Hampshire is experiencing exceptional cost pressures in adult social care services. We now face difficult choices on where to focus our finite resources. This is an issue that is not just how we support vulnerable residents in the short term, but how we continue to deliver the right services in the longer term and prepare for growing demand for an ageing population. The County Council is currently consulting on important changes to our nursing and specialist care accommodation for older adults. I strongly encourage everyone who wishes to comment on our proposals to do so before the consultation closes at 11:59 on Sunday, the 12th of November. The findings will be considered by the Health and Adult Social Care Select Committee in January 2024, prior to any formal decisions taking place. Also on consultations, the school transport consultation. The County Council is also currently consulting on proposed changes to our school and post-16 transport policies. The proposals have been put forward to provide more flexible transport arrangements that better respond to children and young people's needs, demand and external market pressures, while bringing services in line with the latest statutory guidance from the Department of Education. The proposals are not part of the Savings Programme and do not include any changes on eligibility criteria for school and post-16 transport. I urge anyone affected by these proposals, including schools, transport operators, passenger assistants and families who use the services, to respond to the consultations by the 6th of December. Analysis of the consultation feedback and final recommendations for both policies will be presented to the executive lead member for Children's Services at a decision day in 2024. Also, I attended the Children and Families Awards. I was really pleased to attend the Children and Families Awards recently. The annual award ceremony recognises and celebrates the outstanding contributions of foster carers and staff in Hampshire County Council Children and Family Services. I also attended with Councillor Steve Foster as well, and it was great to see so many people there. I was delighted to present one of the awards, and I have the opportunity to meet, congratulate, and thank the award nominees and winners for their fantastic work to support vulnerable children and young people in Hampshire. A member for Champion for Mental Health. On World Mental Health Day last month, I was pleased to announce that Councillor Zoe Huggins is the new member champion for mental health. Councillor Huggins will be raising awareness on mental health across Hampshire and within the council. She has already been very active supporting the County Council's Chat About scheme. Since the scheme was launched in November last year, Chat About sessions have welcomed over 5,700 attendees in our 28 libraries to chat over a hot drink, connect with others in the local community, and find out about additional support if needed. And I would like to warmly welcome Councillor Huggins Zoe to her new role and thank her. Smoking and vaping. I welcomed the government's recent announcement creating a smoke-free generation with additional funding for local smoking cessation services. As part of the government's proposals, the County Council is set to receive nearly £1.5 million per year in additional funding in 2028-29 to expand the Hampshire Stop Smoking service. This gives us a fantastic opportunity to reduce the prevalence of smoking and prevent ill health and early death. I was also pleased to see that the government's consultation on preventing young people from taking up smoking and vaping includes proposals to restrict the sale of disposable vapes. The resolution on underage vaping passed by full council in July highlighted the environmental harm caused by disposable vapes, as well as their potential to act as a gateway for young people to access tobacco products. The County Council, I think, has been on the front foot in responding to the concerning trend of youth vaping, with officers in public health, schools, training standards and teams working closely together to support schools and crack down on underage sales. We will be submitting a response to the government's consultation and stand ready to work alongside government and local partners on the next steps. We previously mentioned Gurkha pensions, and in July, full council passed a motion requesting that I write to the government on Gurkha's veterans' pensions and welfare. I have received a reply from the Minister for Veterans and Service Families stating that discussions are ongoing with the Gurkha veteran welfare community over the Ministry of Defence proposed uplift to a range of support services for Gurkha veterans in the UK and Nepal. At the last meeting, we spoke about the Boys Need Bins update. Further to the motion passed by full council in September, I confirm that I've sent a letter to Hampshire MPs asking them to support Prostate Cancer UK Boys Need Bins campaigns and their call for legislation for the provision of sanitary bins in men's toilets. And I've had a few responses now from our MPs, and I've also been in touch with Councillor Todd in terms of how we look at answering some of those questions that they've raised as well and how they can support. I also, Madam Chairman, met the Duke of Gloucester on another visit as well. I recently joined the Lord Lieutenant and His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester in Porchester to visit SMR Automotive Mirrors UK Limited. SMR Automotive is one of the South East winners of the 2023 King's Award for Enterprise. They received a prestigious Innovation Award for developing carbon emission reducing exterior rear view mirrors. And I think it was one of the first King's Awards that would happen since obviously the King. Finally, on the Business Awards, Hampshire has a very highly regarded, talented and innovative business community. And I'm delighted that this will be recognised at the first ever Hampshire Business Awards, taking place at Farnborough International Exhibition Centre and Conference Centre on the 30th of November. I would like to thank the 166 businesses across Hampshire who submitted 260 nominations for the 14 award categories, including 26 in the Made in Hampshire category, sponsored by the County Council. And that is, I've been told by the people that helped running it, one of the highest entrants across all business awards that they've organised and seen. So I'm really delighted that so many businesses have got engaged, large and small, which was part of the criteria I asked when we started looking at this. The quality of the nominations made the task of shortlisting very difficult, but 85 excellent entrants have been selected to progress to the award ceremony later this month. I would like to thank the Business Magazine, that's who's helping us, for working with the County Council to organise the Hampshire Business Awards, which will be a wonderful celebration of the outstanding businesses, individuals and partnerships that help to make Hampshire such a great place to live. Oh, come on, you must know it by now, for goodness sake. All right, I'll do it for you. To live, work, play, and learn, I've now added, so you have to remember that one as well. Madam Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leader, for that informative report that you've just given us. We have noted that, and with that noted, we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, which is questions. I understand that there are a total of 6 questions received today, and a reminder to everyone that we have a maximum time of 30 minutes in which to deal with those questions. So, the first question today is from Councillor Henderson to Councillor Adams-King. Councillor Henderson, would you like to stand up and present your question?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, the question I have for the elected member for Universal Services is, could you give me an update on how small villages who have strong community support for 20 miles an hour zones are going to be supported by Hampshire County Council to lower the speed limit in specific areas?
Councillor Adams-King.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Henderson, for your question. An updated 20-mile-an-hour policy is due to be considered at one of my decision days early in 2024, hopefully in January. The new policy will aim to provide more flexibility over the use of 20-mile-an-hour limits and zones, whilst also ensuring that proposed schemes are appropriate for the road character. This will include controlling their use on main routes and reflecting anticipated updated guidance from the government on 20-mile-an-hour restrictions, recently announced by the Prime Minister as part of his plan for motorists. Whilst I believe it is important that we consider more 20-mile-an-hour limits and zones, we also need to ensure that the majority of drivers properly understand and respect and abide by them. We plan to introduce a mechanism to enable parish and town councils and communities to fund 20-mile-an-hour restrictions themselves in appropriate areas where routes meet the requirements for a technical assessment and where they can demonstrate that they have community support. The new policy and assessment methodology will draw heavily on the recommendations from the 20-mile-an-hour task and finish group, and will also take into account the findings from the public consultation exercise. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. That's very encouraging to hear. I'd like to thank you for visiting North Waltham. I remember the weather wasn't very kind to us, so I do appreciate it. Over 90% of the village support 20-mile-an-hour zones, given the narrow roads, lack of pavements, and a really busy village school with a lot of out-of-catchment children. How can I ensure that North Waltham are in the first wave of any implementation?
Councillor Adams-King, I suggest you respond with great caution.
Hopefully as much caution, Madam Chairman, as the people who will be driving through the new 20-mile-an-hour zone in North Waltham will do. Thank you. Once we've got the policy in place, we will be opening an application process. I think the important thing to remember, and I know, thank you for inviting me to North Waltham, as with most of my visits recently to see anybody. It's been raining, so if you'd like some rain on your area, do invite me along to come and see you. The important thing is going to be that community support can be demonstrated for it, and also that there are proposals in place to properly monitor and support the motorists in adhering to the limit. And I know we've talked through some of the ideas around that previously. So when we talk about the proposal coming forward in January, there we'll be explaining how that works. We're working on how that process looks, and I suggest that the Parish Council of North Waltham sit poised, ready to make their application through the portal that will be open for them. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Councillor. The third question this morning is from Councillor Minahan to Councillor Oppenheimer. Councillor Minahan. Oh, I've ticked the wrong one off on my list. I beg your pardon. I've jumped one in my haste. Democracy rules. Right. Question number 2. It's from Councillor Crawford to Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last month, every secondary school in London was being offered knife wand detectors. In the wake of 2 fatal stabbings, will the Cabinet member support every secondary school and college in Hampshire being asked if they would also like knife wand detectors by Hampshire Constabulary? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Crawford, for your question. In Hampshire, the Education and Inclusion Team, which also compromises our Inclusion Support Service, works really closely with our head teachers and school management to support them in their work with young people and the management and promotion of good behaviour. Head teachers that we have raised this topic with would not support the action of supplying knife screening wands. Their views are that this would be an overreaction given the very small number of incidents involving such crime in Hampshire schools, and imply a situation that is of greater concern than the incidences suggest. We're not London. Furthermore, it may increase students' anxiety, causing unwarranted concerns and actually promote fear. As with all such issues, education, support, and early intervention are the best methods for reducing such incidents. We do, of course, remain vigilant and will continue to work with school leaders and the constabulary.
Thank you, Councillor Forster. Councillor Crawford, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I found that a very satisfactory response. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We will now proceed with the promised question from Councillor Minahan to Councillor Oppenheimer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for the Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. Following the full Council motion agreed on the 20th of July 23, which sought to combat underage vaping to safeguard the well-being of young people in Hampshire, allowing them to live, work, play and visit our county and learn. What progress has been made? I hope I get a gold star for that, Leader. What progress has been made by Trade and Standards Department with regard to strengthening enforcement of underage sales restrictions at retail outlets? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minahan. Councillor Oppenheimer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Minahan, for the question. Following the full council motion in July, additional funding was provided by Public Health to the Trading Standards team in order for them to develop an internal team to tackle the supply of vapes to young people in the county. Trading Standards were able quickly to appoint one experienced officer internally who's now leading the work, initially supported by apprentices and others within the team, and one further permanent recruitment is underway to support him. Since September, the team have already sent 28 warning letters and conducted over 40 proactive visits to businesses selling vapes to inspect processes and safeguards to prevent underage sales. They've seized over 10,500 illicit vapes, often with excessive liquid content. The total retail value of seized products is now £153,674. And I hope members will agree those are good results. Test purchasing operations are planned using volunteer young people over the forthcoming few months. These will be targeted at shops where reports continue and concerns have been raised as a result of our proactive visits. Formal action will be considered in the case of any sales being made to these volunteer young people. This action may include licence reviews or criminal prosecutions. The Trading Standards team continue to use corporate communications colleagues to amplify messages regarding our activities and to promote our online reporting for concerns relating to vapes. Public Health and Children's Services are also promoting messages concerning the use of vapes through schools, and we're all working closely with local council licensing departments and the police to ensure a robust and coordinated response.
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. Councillor Minahan, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. In my hometown of Gosport, I find it appalling that at some retail outlets, brightly coloured disposable vapes are openly displayed in close vicinity of sweet confectionery. Does the Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services believe the Government's current consultation on regulations around smoking and vaping will ultimately help Hampshire County Council protect our young people from the dangers of vaping? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Oppenheimer.
Thank you. The short answer is yes. As the leader said in his remarks earlier, we welcome the government's consultation, and I think we can all now say that Hampshire County Council was very much on the front foot with our discussion. I can remember right at the beginning of the summer, the Deputy Leader and I met with Councillor Fairhurst and Councillor Forster, and we said, we've got to do something here. We've got to get the teams working closely together. And the officers responded brilliantly to that. The teams have worked very closely together, and we have put in a very positive response to the government consultation. We will also be giving Trading Standards additional sanctions as a result of the government consultation, we hope, which will enable them to punish any people who breach the new and the existing requirements. We would agree with you, I think, that the selling of coloured and flavoured vapes is something that has to stop. And as soon as the government bans it, we'll be out enforcing that very proactively. And I think as a result of the action that we've been talking about just now, all of the vaping shops in Hampshire know that they're going to have to comply with any new regulations from day one, or we're going to be on their case. So I think we can all be glad that Hampshire has done a good thing and is very proactive on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. Now, question 4 from Councillor House to Councillor Adams-King.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So question for Councillor Nick Adams-King. How many school crossing patrol vacancies have arisen since the 1st of April 2023? And how many of these have been filled by new recruitment? Thank you.
Councillor Adams-King.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor House. There have been 20 school crossing patrol vacancies since the 1st of April. One of these is subject to a service level agreement whereby the patrol is funded by the school. 3 have been recruited to with positions filled. One site has not been replaced due to the pedestrian and vehicle survey showing that it did not meet the criteria for a continued presence. And there are 2 sites similarly being surveyed at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor House, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So the question for Councillor Nick Adams-King is, does this mean that the policy that's being touted in the budget review process about reassessing school crossing patrols has been in place already for some time, despite it not being formal county council policy? And what is the likely impact of the budget proposals on future vacancies, given the budget proposals talk about effectively 160 school crossing patrols being removed?
Councillor Adams-King.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think when I answered this, a very similar question from Councillor House back in February, we talked about the challenge at that time of being able to recruit to these positions. And there is a challenge in many areas with us being able to fill school crossing patrol positions because, put simply, people don't want to do the job. In terms of the way in which we are looking at the impact on the budget savings on school crossing patrols, I've been very clear. We don't have a statutory duty to provide school crossing patrols, but we do have a statutory duty to make sure that our children get to school safely. And that will be the guiding principle in any review that we undertake from this point onwards. In terms of the way that we can ensure that that happens, we can look at a number of different solutions. They might include physical changes to crossings. It might include looking at different ways by which we can support schools in getting their children to school safely, but equally, it is just as likely to ensure that some of those school crossing patrols stay in place because it will remain the best and simplest and most cost-effective way for us to ensure that we're undertaking that duty. The one thing I would say is that back in February when we were talking about it, I did make a plea to everybody to see if you can look at your school crossing patrols in your area, and if you have got vacancies, advertise them. I did have a look through Councillor House's Councillor Keith House for Hamble Facebook page and Twitter feed, and unfortunately, I didn't notice that you'd got any calls there, so I would just repeat the call. Please, please, everybody, if you've got school crossing patrol vacancies, do explain to people how important it is. Do go out and try and find people to fill them. I have one just arisen myself in Abridge, where the school crossing patrol gentleman has gone off on long-term sick. So we're looking at the moment actively for that, and I'm badgering neighbours to see if they want to go and take up the lollipop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adams-King, for the detailed response. Question number 5 from Councillor Porter.
Thank you. And in line with your request, Chairman, I'd like to just declare a non-pecuniary, non-prejudicial interest in this matter in my question as a user of the junction and as the Cabinet Member for Place and Local Plan at Winchester City Council. So my question is, the extensive consultation carried out in the late summer for the new Cart and Horses Junction proposal was really welcomed by our community. When will we hear the results of that consultation, and how will this influence the design of the M3 Junction 9 works?
I believe the leader is responding to that question.
Madam Chairman, thank you, and thank you, Jackie, for the question. An engagement report is almost ready for publication on the council web pages and should go live within the next few weeks. In summary, there is a significant support for doing either of the 2 potential junction design options identified in the consultation. The M3 Junction 9 is subject to an examination by the Planning Inspectorate, which is planned to complete in mid-November. The County Council, as the Highway Authority, has made a case to the Planning Inspector that there is a need for improvement to the Cart and Horses Junction as a result of the impact of the M3 Junction 9 scheme, based on our modelling and analysis. It is now for the inspector to determine if they agree with the case put forward. The planning inspector is not aware of the results of the consultation, so once officers have completed their analysis, they would submit an appropriate addition to our evidence. What weight the planning inspector places on the additional information would be for them to determine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Porter, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, and it relates to your answer. There's an impending deadline in response to the National Highways Development Consent Order application. Can you tell us whether there is now common ground between National Highways and Hampshire County Council on the funding and plan for the Cart and Horses Junction, please?
Councillor Humby.
There's clearly still work to do on that. What I can say is there's an agreement on what recognising the importance, and we've made that very clear to highways in terms of also nationally and the inspector about the evidence that there is at the impact that it has on the junction. So there is alignment to a degree. I can't say there's final in terms of the funding because we have to wait and see what the inspector says. And that's important on how we go forward, because if the inspector doesn't agree to it, we need to make sure we identify further funding for anything that could potentially be considered in the future. But I think we do need to wait and see what the planning inspector says. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. Question 6 is a question from Councillor Baines to Councillor North. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question to Councillor North. On May 18th, 2023, this council unanimously passed the joint group motion on anti-racism and discrimination. Can the executive member for Performance, Human Resources, Communications and Inclusion and Diversity please provide all members with an update on the progress of resolutions A, B and D? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor North.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Baines, which I believe reflects the ongoing support of elected members across this authority to further support inclusion and diversity. Resolution A requested that the leader write to government to request that the Code of Conduct legislation is amended so that when racist and discriminatory remarks are made by a councillor in a public forum, their action should fall within the scope of the council's Code of Conduct. This letter was originally sent to Minister Rowley on the 8th of June and has subsequently been followed up, and we are awaiting a response. Resolution B requested that the County Council's Conduct Advisory Panel considers amending the County Council's arrangements for dealing with complaints against members to include reference to the Council's ability to invite a member to resign as part of an action of censure determined by the Council in accordance with those arrangements when a member is found to have expressed racist or unlawfully discriminatory beliefs publicly. This is currently in progress. Conversations have taken place with the chairman of the committee, Councillor Kempji, and next steps are being prepared with a report and recommendations for the panel to consider. Resolution D requested that the executive member for the portfolio inclusive of inclusion and diversity, ensures that equality, diversity and inclusion training is available for all members annually. I can confirm that these arrangements are in place. The Member Development Group, chaired by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Ros Chad, has agreed the overall content and arrangements for this training, and the intention is to begin the rollout in December 2023, with all members being provided with the opportunity to attend this training by the end of March 2024.
Thank you, Councillor North. Councillor Baines, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor North, for your response. I appreciate those answers. Would you be able to ensure that any updates and progress relating to this or any future motions, especially those of such vital importance, such as this joint group motion, could be communicated to all members at the earliest possible opportunity?
Councillor North.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor Baines. I will commit to email out all members updates on those points. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed, members. And again, congratulations to everyone. We are well inside our 30-minute limit. And thank you for submitting nice, concise and focused questions. It does make a difference. So we will now move on to part 1 of the agenda, which is matters for decision. Item number 8, appointments. You will find that on your screen or in your pack on pages 15 to 16 rather. And I'd like to ask the leader to introduce the paper.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. The report proposes a small number of appointments on this occasion, and I move the recommendations, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Are there any debate? Right, then we turn to recommendations, which are on page 15. There are 3 recommendations, A, B and C. Are you willing to take them en bloc? Agreed? Agreed? Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, members. We will now move on to item 9. And again, this is the medium-term financial strategy update and the savings programme and the savings proposals. I'm going to invite the leader to present the report.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. Members, at the budget setting meeting last year, I was accused of delivering one of the shortest speeches in introducing our budget in 23-24. I do not apologise for that, as it is indicative of the fact that this administration has been honest, open and transparent about its financial position for many years. The same applies today, and we have been saying since 2018 that if the funding regime for local government does not change, we will not be financially sustainable in the longer term, as we cannot continue to make savings in other services to fund the huge demand pressures we face across social care, special educational needs and school transport. In 2022, we highlighted this position again to the government in the strongest terms with a joint letter with Kent, making it clear that if something didn't change in the medium term, we would not be financially sustainable, given that by 2023-24, we will have taken £640 million from our budgets over the last 13 years. It should be no surprise to anybody in this chamber, therefore, that by 2025-26, based on what we know from the government at this time, that we face the position for the first time that we cannot close the predicted two-year budget gap of £132 million through the identification of recurring savings alone, and that's important. Whilst I applaud officers for their efforts, they, like us, did not join local government to reduce services to our residents. You will see that the total recurring savings proposed recommended from Cabinet to the County Council only total 90 million, with 75 million of this coming into effect in 2025-26. These are not the things that we wish to do. I would very much rather be stood here talking about the expansion of services and how new initiatives might help to improve the lives of residents of Hampshire. But the reality is that we must set a balanced budget by law, something that this administration takes very seriously and will not shy away from. We are not alone in this position, with many upper-tier authorities struggling to balance the books over the next few years. We see in the press report after report about struggling councils. Many of these are because they have made some potentially bad decisions in the past or have not made difficult decisions that they should. But it is clear that many of those are now warning of financial disaster, as well as well-run authorities who are simply running out of money in the face of growing demand for services and limited options for raising funding and reducing services. We've been saying to the government for many years that something has to change. We cannot continue to make savings to meet the growth in demand for social care services. The maths simply don't work. And I will be sending a further letter after this meeting, which I will be asking our MPs to support, urging the government to provide more support to councils in the 2024-25 settlement, with a view to then fundamentally changing the way that local government is funded in the next comprehensive spending review. Earlier in the week, I also met with a range of other county council leaders, and it is clear that we are all facing the same position. And a joint letter has been sent to the Chancellor this week to add further weight to the voice of local government. Having listened to the other leaders, and as I've said many times before to this chamber, I would rather be facing these challenges in Hampshire than any other authority. And that was confirmed to me having met all those other leaders last week. Despite the challenges that we face, our financial prudence and strength of our reserves position means that we are still confident that we can balance the budget in 24-25. And we have, assuming that we have no further major financial shocks. Others do not have that luxury, and they do not have the same time and space to properly plan and implement savings in the way that we do, something that has stood us in good stead for many years and will do so again. As part of that process, we will of course be undertaking a range of stage 2 consultations that will begin in the new year, which will seek residents' and stakeholders' views on the options that we are considering for changing services from April 2025 onwards. This is a genuine exercise, and we are keen to hear people's views and ideas on how we can limit the impact of these savings, whilst also helping to balance the budget position. You have my personal commitment that as long as I'm leader of this great council, I will do my utmost to ensure that we get the funding we need to continue to provide great services to Hampshire's residents. Despite these challenging circumstances, it is pleasing to note that we still provide some of the highest performing services in the country and are still able to invest in new projects. Our children's services are outstanding, and it is pleasing to note that after 10 years of supporting the Isle of Wight Children's Services, we are able to leave that relationship in the knowledge that they have the skills and processes to ensure children remain safe on the island, and educational standards have increased significantly. Earlier in the year, we identified £22.5 million to put into highways maintenance and changed our approach to dealing with repairs to the network in order to ensure we have better, stronger roads today. Over the summer, Cabinet and County Council signed off an ambitious investment plan to provide new state-of-the-art facilities to help care for some of our most vulnerable adults, particularly those who suffer from complex dementia. We remain a major provider of care services, and I know residents value the excellent care they already receive in our facilities. I'm excited by the opportunity that our new responsibilities for the economy and skills and growth will bring from April 2024, and we are working effectively with the LET to ensure a smooth transition for taking these services on and taking them forward in a way that will generate economic benefits for now and in the future. Finally, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank members and officers alike for the work they do in making Hampshire the great place, and yes, you're going to get it again, to live, work, play, visit and learn. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that report, Leader. Members, at this point in time, I am to invite you to put questions only. This is not a debate. We go into questions first. So will you please raise your hand if you have any questions to be asked? Over there, what's that one? Councillor Taylor? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. My question concerns Cabinet recommendations to full Council, and in particular recommendation 4 that states that should any saving proposals be rejected, that alternative options to the same value will need to be developed by the appropriate directorate. This seems to suggest that savings would have to come from revenue only, Is that the case, or can capital programmes be reviewed and reserves be included?
The Leader.
I might take advice on that in terms of whether it's a capital programme. We will go through into our consultations, and if it's all right, Madam Chairman, I will use the new procedures we got just to check in with Rob Carr on that process, if that's okay.
Thank you. I can confirm that it would need to be recurring revenue savings that are replaced, because obviously it's recurring revenue that we need, whereas the capital programme only gives us one-off funding.
Councillor Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I acknowledge the concern the Leader has, obviously, with our budget situation? But can I ask him the question, do you believe, because this has been a 5-year period of budget cuts, can I ask him, are you totally satisfied with the support that you've had from the Conservative MPs of Hampshire?
Councillor Humby.
Thank you for that question. Sit down. Okay. So what I will say is we have had many meetings with our MPs. And just recently, I have written to them again, explaining that I'm going to write to the Chancellor. And some of them have responded to that. I've sort of taken their advice now on how they can help. So the letter, just to remind everybody, that I sent along with Roger Goff to Kent actually had a significant impact on the autumn statement. And we were told very clearly that made a difference to the amount of money we got to help in social care. Specifically to your question, so what they've now done, they have responded to me. I now have a meeting planned with them early next week to sit down and discuss with them, go through all the things that we've given them, the evidence before, to present that as a joint letter. Hopefully they will all support to actually send that in to the Secretary of State as well. So the answer is, I think things have changed, and I think there's more recognition now because we keep saying the same message, and we are now getting that support.
Thank you, Leader. Are there any more questions at this point? All right. Councillor Drew.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Just following up on that question, would the Leader agree with me that the adage, all politics is local, and consequently, if funding for the important services that we and other local authorities supply dries up, then it's the national politicians who are going to get it in the neck as well. So I would imagine that they will be paying very careful attention to the changes that we're considering today. And would you agree that that's a crucial thing? That's the question, yes. It's always a
To answer the question, I absolutely agree.
Short answer. Well done, sir.
Any more questions? Right. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hiscock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a quick question, really. These proposals include massive cuts that will have a devastating negative impact on residents with disabilities, those with poor mental health being referenced the most. These cuts affect vital free to access locally based mental health services. Given the very high proportion of rough sleepers with mental health and substance dependency issues, would the Leader recommend that these people turn for advice to our local Hampshire MPs about their life choices?
Councillor Humby.
By all means, what I would start off by saying, we've got to remember we've still got 12 stage 2 consultations to go through. So be clear, these are proposals that have got to go back to consultations. But indeed, any of us and any of our residents are always quite entitled to go and speak to their MPs and raise any issues that we'd like to. And I'd always encourage them to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. Are there any more questions? Right. I'd now like to invite the Leader of the Liberal Democrat Group, Councillor Keith House, to respond to the proposals of the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This is a really bleak situation that we're now in, and it gets worse. We've been through this loop so many times before. And I started off by just looking at what I said 2 years ago, and actually much of that could be said today. The story hasn't really changed dramatically. Rather like Rob not having your notes, Madam Chairman, at the start of the meeting for his announcements about where he's been over the last while or so, I didn't have the benefit of Rob's notes before preparing my thoughts on today's meeting, so there might be a little bit of repetition along the way, but I imagine the conclusion might be quite different. 2 years ago, when we were debating savings proposals, I made the suggestion then, perhaps tongue-in-cheek, that we're back here now, in November 2023, with perhaps a fourth Tory Prime Minister, after Boris Johnson had got bored and returned to making money. Well, of course, I was right on Boris going, for the wrong reasons, but severely wrong in not anticipating that we'd now be on our fifth Tory Prime Minister, who, like the previous four, had failed to value and preserve local services. And worse, that the fourth, in her short and disastrous premiership, would in Trussonomics create spiralling inflation and interest rates that would further wreck the economy and make the overall conditions for local government even worse. And the other problem is the same too. We have touched on it already in discussion. Hampshire's Conservative MPs keep on voting for more of the same, pushing more and more councils to the brink. And it is their choices. You know, we have dear Suella holding the whole country to ransom at the moment. Just think what Hampshire's MPs could do collectively if they really had the bottle and the guts and the determination to put local people in Hampshire before their short-term careers. And most of them have got short-term careers. What change could be achieved? It really could be dramatic. So we've now seen a handful of councils formally go bankrupt, with probably many tens of others likely to follow in the same over the next 2 or 3 years, unless something radically changes. Sadly, Hampshire risks being one of those councils a little way down the line. So even after the savage cuts after more than a decade, with £640 million removed from services, and now a recurring deficit of £132 million, we still have to cut more, and even our dedicated staff team can't find the savings to reach a balanced budget. Even the last 2 packages of reductions show £71 million still to be found, with the consequences that we're now doing what your own side have said they would never, ever do, which is the unsustainable position of funding revenue services from reserves. And I remember many times when Councillor Reid and Councillor Kendall up here were saying that we were suggesting that. Well, actually, we weren't. We were suggesting using reserves to fund methods to find improvements to reduce the revenue demand. Now, we're using reserves to prop up the budget. And that is simply not sustainable. And as we've heard, the proposals here do rely on another £57 million to be taken from reserves, with an ongoing gap of £42 million each year, even before looking at what demographic trends suggest will be even further and deeper cuts if we get to a position of having this debate again in 2 years' time. If we're to get to the position of having this debate again in 2 years' time. The reality, of course, is this won't be possible. By then, the scale of unachieved savings and new pressures will have tipped us over the edge, just as has happened in Birmingham, in Slough, in Thurrock, in Woking, in Croydon. And by then, and this is not just speculation now, it's clearly a fact, others will have been in the same position, many tens of others, because they are in a worse position than we are. This is a crisis for local government across the entire country. And it could include some of our neighbours, like Southampton. Smaller unitary authorities are clearly suffering. I think it's unlikely to be the case in any of Hampshire's districts. Life is a bit easier for districts than it is for upper tier authorities with adult and children's social care. And it certainly won't be the case for those superstars like Gosport, Hart, Winchester and Eastleigh, that even they are now having to find savings, often to protect services that they are still providing that in the past would have been provided by this county council for young people, for the arts, for culture, and for community groups. That's true. It is true. Yeah. So SIPFA, who are the financial guardians of probity in council financing, identify higher risks in Hampshire, given our relatively low unallocated reserves and our high social care ratio as a proportion of our overall expenditure. And it is bleak. I'll say that again, it is bleak. And it stands no chance of getting fixed until at the very least we have a change in government. The autumn statement this month may provide a little sticking plaster, just as it did last year, and the budget may do so in the spring. But this government has bigger worries about failures between now and the general election that it can't do anything other than kick the local government finance can down the road, just as it has done for the last 2 years. We heard as much in the King's speech, and the thinnest programme of legislation for a decade, where economic growth and the cost of living crisis failed to get a mention, any more than the long-promised and never-to-be-seen reform of social care or long-term financing of our NHS to put promoting public health first, that is beyond the odd croaking wheeze of a smoking ban for teens and up. So, I repeat what I said earlier, it's not entirely your fault, Rob. You know? It really isn't. And you have started at least, to do some of the things that we have repeatedly called for, year after year, and asked you to do. Step up lobbying. Yeah, there has been some lobbying, and it has some effect, just a bit, along with the concerted lobbying across the sector. So I'll give that a B- for now, and we'll come back and see how we progress over the next 6 months. And abandoning the salami slicing of local services to start at least starting to look at priorities, what matters most, has now begun to happen. But there's still no real sign of genuinely embracing commercialism and income generating. Now, back in the days of Ken Thornbury, we heard him mentioned earlier on, there were even then ambitious plans to think about how the county council could help in building homes. Long gone. Even the land sales programme that would deliver more homes has stalled, and I see that in my own community of Hedge End, where the wonderful new Deer Park School stands in splendid isolation with mud all around it, acre after acre, where an empty development site allocated now 10 years ago development that still stands stalled with no progress from this council. That could have generated jobs for our local economy, and it could have generated income in council tax income too. Many down, maybe never down, more like at the rate it's been going now after 27 years, but at least the new Basingstoke Council, District Council, is taking it seriously. There was the centralisation of our on-street parking, and that some of us thought, perhaps with a bit of fear in our hearts, that this would result in new proposals for more on-street parking charges to generate income and tougher enforcement to generate income. And all of that would actually have been justified. But no, it hasn't happened. All we're seeing is less enforcement, which means there's even less income, and it means that residents are paying for parking permits in some parts of our county where they sometimes now can't even park in front of their homes because of that lack of enforcement. Then there was spending on these new lovely IKEA lights that we had agreed 2 years ago. £1 million to make this place a nice room. Well, it's still damned uncomfortable seats, aren't they? So we haven't really achieved that. That £1 million could have been used to prop up local services, but it wasn't. And we have conferences run. There's another one coming up soon on Hampshire 2050. Well, frankly, at this rate, we're not going to get to Hampshire 2030, let alone 2050. There are big gaps here. They and in other areas won't solve the deficit, but they would make a difference and save some of the services residents are about to lose. Homelessness prevention, we've already heard talked about, that stores up long-term social care costs, kicking the can down the road. Reduced care packages for older and younger adults that stores up future NHS costs, kicking the can down the road. removal of bus services that push people more towards social isolation and others to greater car use, creating congestion and carbon impacts. That's hardly tackling climate change. Longer journeys to household waste recycling centres that will increase the cost of fly tipping to our district council, so that doesn't matter perhaps. And again, more congestion and more carbon impacts. Axing long-term highways maintenance schemes, which will push up the demand for patching repairs and increase accidents on poorly maintained winter roads. Ending school crossing patrols, putting our children at risk. Arts, culture, grants, libraries, all for the chop. And even with the package of back office savings, moving to a position where we have thinned out our finance and HR teams, putting real pressure on our ability to manage our budgets and our staff at risk, and undermining our ability to plan and work up genuine innovation for the future. And these aren't all Hampshire problems, they're countrywide problems, and we're seeing the local impact of those here. But this is the impact of Hampshire's Conservative MPs failing to act and stand up for Hampshire people. What we can see is the true cost of Conservative mismanagement and misrule of the nation's finances since 2015. The highest taxes since the Second World War, and now some of the worst public services in the developed world. And the likely conclusion of that? Well, likely further removal of likely decision-making as a consequence of the even more likely nationalisation of social care, the abolition of county government in sight in the remaining two-tier areas with expanded cities and metro mayors, and it never needed to happen. It's still not quite too late for Hampshire's MPs to avert this happening. We really are in the 11th hour of the 11th day, certainly as we approach the 11th hour of the 11th month, and we think about some of the consequences of past mistakes across our world. So it isn't too late, but we're nearly there. I don't see any sign that it's going to happen, because Hampshire's MPs are still more interested in their short-term careers than the long-term benefits to public services in Hampshire. And that's why, Madam Chairman, we can't support the package in Recommendation C, and we'd like a recorded vote on Recommendation C when it's moved. It reflects a poor choice of priorities when we have so many creaking public services and so much creaking public infrastructure. It may be the Conservative choice of priorities, but it's not the Liberal Democrat choice of priorities. And let's bring on that election.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor House, for your response to the report. I now call upon the leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Alex Crawford, if you wish to respond to the proposals in the report, reminding you that you have 15 minutes to do so, if you so wish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can promise you I won't take that long. So I'd start off by saying that last Sunday, the Council announced that in Talk Money Week, it was encouraging residents concerned about their financial situation to reach out for the help they need. If only the government was encouraging this Council, concerned as we are about our financial situation, to reach out for the help we need. Instead, we are brought face to face with the cliff edge in the Council's finances, even if it is 18 months away. We still have no definitive estimates of the costs that this Council will face in the next 2 years, because the Chancellor of the Exchequer statement, autumn statement, is not due for another 2 weeks. In the meantime, we are stuck in limbo, waiting to hear what he says. Where is the Council going to find the money for spending in 2025-26? Is the Council really approaching that tipping point, going over the cliff edge, and unable to meet the legal duty to balance the budget? That being said, I saw the budget consultation of 2024-26, it remained too centralised, and it was overcomplicated. Long questions, long reports to read before you could even answer the questions. So the council had difficulty in getting responses. Fewer than 3,000 responses out of a population of 1.4 million. Pathetic. Of Rushmore's 100,000 residents, only 137 responded in 6 weeks. By contrast, last month, in a simple survey of 550 residents in Aldershot North Division, 249 responded within 3 days about the safety of a new pedestrian crossing on the A325 Farnborough Road. And we got 185 individual comments for a report, a useful report that went to the independent safety auditor. Now, the 795 pages for this item suffer from what is generally known as GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. And the reason for that is that, for example, the Mosaic data revealed that prestige positions were overrepresented by a factor of 5 in the responses, with 26% of those responding compared with 5% in the population of Hampshire as a whole. 5 times overrepresented. What does prestige mean? It means high incomes, living in large houses in desirable neighbourhoods, and having professional roles. Those were the people that dominated the submissions to the consultation. Also overrepresented was the district of Winchester City Council, with 16% of responses compared with its 9% of the Hampshire population. So it seems to me that there's some scrutiny required to determine if these sorts of biases distorted the results to such an extent that we can have no confidence in the recommendations based on them. Now, one of the big issues in our area of Rushmore is that parents strongly resent the proposal to end school crossing patrols. There's 190 of them in the county, apparently. And the proposal is to cut 1.1 million from the annual budget by cutting out those 190 school crossing patrols. So one school crossing patroller wanted me to let you know how important her role is to our communities. And she wrote, "We not only ensure a child crosses safely, we make sure everyone who wants to cross is safe. We may be the first smile a child has seen that day. We keep silly secrets. We have a duty of care. We notice if a child is acting a little different or out of routine. We sympathize when we are shown huge gashes or grazes in their hands, legs, or heads. We praise when a certificate is waved in our faces. We listen to parents, carers, and guardians who may be concerned or simply want a natter. We watch, we listen. We are more than SCPs. We are friends of the community. A lot of children are only allowed to walk to school on their own because of us. We are routine. Take us away and boom, the knock-on effect is huge. We don't get paid a lot, but would Hampshire County Council rather not pay us and allow a child to pay with their life? Stay safe." Now, the Council are promising consultation on every one of those 190 SCPs to see if there is another way to have the safe routes to school for pupils that the law requires for every school. But how much will 190 consultations cost in terms of staff, surveys, and reports for committees, cabinet and council, not to mention providing any other ways to ensure the safe routes to school once you've taken out the school crossing patrols, all to save 1.1 million. Madam Chairman, government-imposed austerity going back to 2010, it has to be said, not simply starting in 2015. I wonder why that date was chosen. We need a different approach, and we need it now. One that respects councils and their communities. We need a general election, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford, for your response to the proposed paper. I'm now going to invite the leader of the independent group, Councillor Tree, if you wish to make a response to the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Reminding you, of course, that you have 15 minutes.
I'll try and get it done in 5, if that would be helpful. I'm not sure I can manage that, I'm afraid. So, look, I got elected, over 2 years ago now to contribute and not criticise for the sake of it. Our independent group is united in supporting Hampshire residents and trying to be a constructive and useful opposition group. A society can be judged on how it treats its most vulnerable and those who require our support and services. Hampshire is an affluent county, but there are significant pockets of deprivation within it. We appreciate there has been public consultation, but this does not reach all of our residents. I would note that Labour Councillor Crawford has described the number of respondents as pathetic and read some very interesting stats. And I would also add to that that the diversity of respondents is perhaps even more important. If you're a pollster trying to work out the outcome of a general election, you get a sample from as many different backgrounds and people as possible. Otherwise, you would get obviously a completely skewed and wrong result. So I'm just wondering whether there is a way to look at that in the future. And therefore, it is our duty as members to strive to represent everyone, including the invisible residents who don't speak up for themselves, and to be their advocate and be their voice. The cost of living crisis has, of course, already pushed middle-income residents close to the edge and into poverty, or potential poverty. To hit these residents with huge tax rises could also result in a new ability to pay. And one of the greatest challenges for any member is to justify to residents why tax has to go up and up and up, but services go down, down, down over time. Residents would expect one or the other. It is our duty, we've heard some of the specifics that I intended to raise, but I won't repeat. Hence, I can keep it to 5 minutes. We recognise the thankless task the administration have, and it is a thankless task, and have no doubt in their integrity in them wanting to do the best for Hampshire residents. The choices are bleak. Either make cuts now and try to balance the books, even though we know that will harm residents. Take a view that the issue of a Section 114 is inevitable and start using reserves and planning for that day, which ultimately would result in statutory services and an even worse position for our residents. So I look at this and I stand here and I see the arguments from the Lib Dems and the Conservatives and Labour, but what a terrible choice for the administration to be in. Cut or potentially end up with statutory services, which is an even greater cut. And one way or the other, you're harming residents. It's a horrific position to be in. To be fair, the administration have opted to strive to balance the books in the least destructive way possible and starve off effective bankruptcy for at least the immediate years ahead. We acknowledge point 26 in that the straight line savings targets were not imposed in an arbitrary way, and the leader has been robust in his lobbying of central government from what we've heard. For example, the joint letter issued with the leader of Kent County Council, which we support, noting the 5 council discussion mentioned also earlier today. There is a Hampshire County Council election in approximately a year and a half, And it is noted that the potential alternative Liberal Democrat administration has not put forward an alternative plan or solution to these recommendations. But we do agree with them that ultimately it is the national government who is responsible for this mess, and we seek to work constructively with all groups in this chamber, including the Liberal Democrat group and the Labour group. The major issue not touched upon directly in this report, and that nobody has actually mentioned so far, is local government reform and how this may affect future matters. Pan Hampshire is clearly dead, and any financial settlement that may have come from that to save the day, won't be Hampshire County Council's saviour. But what of the upper and lower tier system? Will it remain untouched here? So many unanswered questions. The Local Government Act 2000 makes it clear that the role of scrutiny in the financial process is to hold the executive to account and ensure its decisions are in the best interests of the residents we serve. Ultimately, we are not part of the executive decision-making process and are a small group. However, we will continue to sit on the various committees and try to contribute in a meaningful and constructive way to mitigate the harm that such cuts may cause. Regardless of how well-intended this plan is, it will surely harm our most vulnerable and lower-paid residents, and that is not acceptable to us. As you know, we are a group of independents and are free to vote individually on conscience, with Councillor Parker-Jones and Councillor Pankhurst being independent and me being a member of the local White and Borden Community Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tree, for your detailed response. Members, we now go into a general debate on the paper. Can I remind everyone that you may only speak once and you are limited to 4 minutes, and the clock will be ticking against you. Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor House was kind enough to mention the fact that I objected over the years to any spending of our reserves, even during those periods when we were making substantial savings in departments as staff members left us through voluntary and other forms of exits. I just need to remind him and his group that the reason we did that was because reserves were meant for really rainy days. Such a rainy day has come upon us now, and we need to utilise some of those reserves for our revenue account, even though we know that it is a one-off arrangement, but at least it will tide us over the next couple of years to the point where, along with every other council in this country, a government would need to come to our aid. Remember, we have one of the lowest council taxes in the country. I think it's the second lowest. Therefore, any increase in council tax is of hardly any impact to us. Yet we have one of the lowest grants in the country as well. I'm just a little bit concerned at the moment about paragraph 96 on page 38 of 902. I stress 902. It is a table which indicates that 80% of our revenue expenditure is going on basically health services for adults and children, and that we need to look for savings in this area because of the fact that it is such a large proportion of our expenditure. I am concerned that in retendering adult social care and in retendering children's social care out into the market, we do not put rates down to a point where it is uneconomic for those that are going to respond to the tenders to be able to do so. I have experience of this myself, and I declare an interest in terms of a hospice which owns a care company for charitable purposes, that we do not wish to see standards of care dropping to a point simply in order to meet minimum standards. This is probably one of the most important services that we can give to our people, and it's very important that we look at quality of care as much as cost of care. And I stress that of those two, I would weight quality at 70% and cost at only 30%. And I do hope that there will be some kind of rigorous appraisal of that when we come to looking at these costs. I stress that I will be looking hard at the quality aspect on the committee that I serve on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Councillor Drew.
I'm live. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, there are lots of tough choices that we've got to make, and they're jolly difficult, and none of us actually want to have to make them. But I do think on a technical point, I think a lot of people are confusing capital and revenue. And as we know, they're different, but in a public forum, I think many members of the public won't actually understand the difference. And it's important that we present those arguments in the right way. Now, I have 20 parish councils in my patch, Test Valley Central. I try and get round all of them, although 15 in 1 week, I managed 14. But the important point about the parish is that they are keen advocates of their local communities, and I've been spending the last year or so talking to them about the difficult decisions that we are having to make on this council. But most of them understand that if you're looking 2 years ahead and you're running a business, which is what this essentially is, that it's right to plan early so you don't fall off. I think someone mentioned a cliff edge. So we're not going to do that. We've got it in hand and plan to make these changes in order to provide and continue to provide essential services to our residents. There's about 1 or 2 sentences that I agree with Keith House on, and that is perhaps, that'll be the limit. Because I think there probably are opportunities where we can look to generate a little bit more revenue, but some of that requires legislative changes. And again, using my parishes as an example, there's some sage nodding when I say, actually, if we could make a small charge for every time someone, for example, attends an HWRC, that would ensure that we'd maintain the network and improve it. And I think that's something that's important to recall. Also, a lot of discussion, quite rightly, on children's safety on crossing roads. I hope, like most people here, most councillors, we are school governors, and we understand the challenges that schools are facing, but particularly with our contribution to the Lollipop service. As Councillor Adams-King said, many of those will be preserved and saved because we have a duty to ensure that children can get to school safely. So I'm not suggesting anyone's necessarily scaremongering here, but if it's the right thing to do to maintain that service in the interests of safety, then quite rightly we should be doing that. And also there should be opportunities for local innovations and initiatives where perhaps the school or the parish council could get involved with providing a service that doesn't meet our criteria, but the local community want it, and they should be able to do that. And my final observation, I'm not sure that Councillor House is the most convincing or best advocate for commercial involvement, bearing in mind the news item that we saw yesterday. Now, we only saw it on the news, but for a district or a borough to borrow 300 million to build a housing estate does seem quite a long step, a huge leap in the dark. So I'm not sure that sort of commercial involvement is the ones we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drew. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by firstly identifying what is probably the most important statement in this report, which says, and it's the last statement, which says that without swift and fundamental change in the way that local authority finances are managed, this council will not have a financial
sustainable future. The leader has identified that the finances of Hampshire County Council are stretched to the limit, and we know that generally local government is facing very difficult challenges in the years to come. And some authorities are in the position of not being able to balance their budgets for this financial year. We're not in that position, and we're not in that position because of the strength of our reserves, which are our bedrock, the basis which enables us to keep our position stable over the next 2 financial years. We have been putting money aside for that purpose into reserves, and our reserves were, I know, earlier this year, the highest in the country. That's where we stand, and that is where our financial security in the short to medium term lies. We knew there'd be a tipping point. That's come. It came last year when we had to move money to balance the budget then, and this financial year we will have to find 50 million to balance the budget now for 23-24. Fortunately, we have in BBR 136 million, which will cover that shortfall. And for 24-25, shortfall 80 million, we've got that pretty well in BBR as well. So that explains why our position is relatively strong for the next 2 years. Moving to 25-26, the leader is right. We can't at the moment identify where that shortfall will be. All I would say about that is we have so far found 90 million of savings that could be made. The 132 million could go up, it could go down by 25-26. Just for example, in the finance report of 2022, July, the shortfall was identified at 200 million. It's now 132. Looking at possibilities of where we might save any shortfall, we know, but we can't be sure, that there will be finance of probably from underspends in directorates this year and next. We also have the money from the early payment of pensions, and we have increased interest from our reserves. All of those could help to bridge the gap for 25-26. So in conclusion, what I would say is that we are on stormy waters, that's for sure. But frankly, I'd rather be on this boat with these officers than with any other boat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Latham. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not going to try and make any political point scoring out of what's a very difficult position, and I'm sure no one is enjoying the position that we find ourselves in today. And I'm equally sure that all the officers and staff have produced the best options that they possibly can. I also see and understand the logic for taking the strategic stance on cutting back on non-essential and non-statutory commitments. After all, that would definitely happen in a Section 114 situation, and at least this way, residents have a chance to make some mitigation over a longer period of time before the inevitable happens. Parents can try to mitigate changes to school transport by choosing to pay increased charges or to arrange their own transport. Care users can try to reduce the amount of care they need or ask relatives to chip in or help out. Road users can swerve potholes or just not drive or clear their own roads of ice and snow in the winter. But there is one group of residents that we serve that cannot take mitigation of any kind: the homeless. Being homeless is not a lifestyle choice, despite what the Home Secretary might think. Of nearly 40,000 people assessed in the southeast of England this year as needing homeless support, the largest group of those people were people with children. People become homeless for all sorts of reasons. Deaths in families, relationship breaks up, domestic violence. It really is not a lifestyle choice. And whilst homelessness may not be a statutory responsibility for the council, we have been providing financial and help and support to our boroughs through the use of social inclusion grants, which the proposals before us intend to remove. This comes at the same time as their own funding for homelessness is being cut by central government. It also comes at a time when refugee hotels are closing, causing greater homelessness problems for our areas. This recommendation is not just morally wanting, it may also be entirely counterproductive and end up costing us more. We do have a statutory duty to both assess and address people's eligibility, care and support needs, of which the homeless have many. And currently, in a great number of cases, that assessment and support is often part of a package provided by others, reducing that cost to us. If hostels close or services fail as a result of the withdrawal of this funding, this grant, then we run the risk of an unquantified number of assessments and complex needs requirements which we will have to provide. This is an additional unforecasted budget pressure which could be significant. I believe we do not have sufficient information to make an informed decision, and relying on discovering this information at stage 2 consultation is way too late to reduce the dreadful impact. So I think that the challenge that I give to the Cabinet, and I hope they will grasp this and find a way to remove this before the February budget meeting, because at present I will not support a strategy or budget that contains this cut, and I hope other people will not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Parker-Jones.
Thank you very much. I wanted to speak today about how incongruent some of the decisions are that are being taken within the recommendations. We clearly don't want to see services dropping. Our residents deserve far better, and even our most prestigious residents didn't want to see a reduction in services, as was highlighted. That was the worst option for them. So, again, I'm back to my unintended consequences. We do things that may seem quite minor and might trivial, but their impacts are huge, and the savings which can be felt for other organisations are indeed huge also. And I'm thinking again about public transport. Whether we're trying to meet our climate change and environmental emergency commitment, or whether we're trying to reduce social isolation and making sure that people can live independently. So I'm hugely disappointed to see the cessation of non-commercial bus services and community transport provision. If things like this go, and this is just one example, and I could pull lots of other elements from this document to discuss when I talk about unintended consequences, but when something like this goes, those costs don't just disappear. They're absorbed and put upon other organisations, whether it's care, whether it's, I've gone fuzzy, whether it's care, whether it's the health service, whether it's districts, whether it's our parishes, the money still has to be found. Maybe it's even within our own organisation as care costs increase because people can't live independently. And yeah, we have one of the things they suggested is, well, we'll talk to the third sector parties to try and mitigate this. But then only 5 pages later, on page 96, they then go on to say how our grants are going to be cut. So how do we reconcile this? The very people we're asking to pick up these services, we're telling them, you won't have our support and our money. So I find it incongruent. I was so depressed when I read the bare minimum, and it's sad although it might seem refreshing, that we're actually talking about cuts. We're not talking about savings. And I really think it does a disservice to our residents to say this is a savings programme. It's a cuts programme. It is our residents that will feel this. We could talk about the waste and recycling and the fact that if you remove that, people are going to travel further. They will fly tip more. There are so many things that I find incongruent. And just like Councillor Taylor actually mentioned, waiting till we get to the second stage consultation to approve this would be hugely inappropriate. Unfortunately, I know that this has been the 13 years of government austerity. I know that this has come centrally, and I know that officers and indeed everyone in this chamber wants to do their best. But I cannot support this because it is my residents and Hampshire residents that are going to be hurt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter-Jones. Before we proceed, just to let everyone know that there are 8 members on the waiting list waiting to speak. The next councillor is Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I put this on my phone because I wanted to make sure I cover the points. I have great respect for the officers who prepared this paper, but this is a political paper led by you, the leader, Councillor Humby, and it's cleverly written. It invites the public and us as opposition members to sympathise rather than get angry. We at this council are very polite, and we're grateful for the officers for laying it on the line in this paper, but I am really angry for children. Paragraphs 20, 21 and 22 are especially concerning, but paragraph 142 is the one you all need to look at on page 49. There are 3 points I'd like to raise, all with different reasons for being in the problem we're in. There's school transport, special needs, mental health support and autism diagnosis. Despite intensive lobbying, there are no changes to school transport. Indeed, the government guidance was reiterated in a current paper published only this summer. But the way in which Hampshire County Council delivers school transport needs a new approach. Seeking contracts for services just weeks before the term starts is never going to get you good value transport. Hampshire County Council must invest in better ways to get children safely to school, and I completely agree with Councillor Taylor. Special needs costs. Every child deserves the best education we can provide. For some children, we must acknowledge their special needs to help them learn best. And learn. We've just added it in. The cost of the high needs block has been acknowledged by government, but not funded. This debt is not in your revenue account, and it's not a capital cost. In paragraph 142, page 49, it describes how the DSG debt in Hampshire has built up over the years. And it is now going to be £250 million by 25-26. Even if it is acknowledged by government and something's done about it by 27-28 and in 25-26, it'll put a definite problem on our cash flow. And it risks, cleverly hidden in paragraph 142, we know that the failure by the government to address this unfunded debt risks an S114 notice if it's not paid out and acknowledged by government. Paragraph 49 says it. So special needs units are being provided right across the county, and they are doing a very, very good job. And our people that are providing them should be really praised. But they are expensive and a symptom, therefore, of my third concern. CAMS and autism services are actually NHS funded, but the effect on the dismal failure of these services has made a huge effect on the ways in which Hampshire Children's Services must operate, including social care and schools. This has resulted in Hampshire County Council's 2021 and 2023 services still not fully delivered. And it doesn't actually even start to think about the 2025 proposals. So I do sympathise, Councillor Humby, but I am still angry that lobbying the government was one of the options on the budget paper that went out to the public. It isn't realistic to offer that when we know that despite a sympathetic ear, and we're being sympathetic to you today, we know the government has done very little to help us here in Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope you won't be offended if I stay seated. I have a health issue with my back. It's not because I'm a spineless politician either. Chairman, I welcome the leader's short speech. His short speeches are so much better than his longer speeches. It's a grim situation that we've seen many times before. And I think I said on a previous occasion that it sounds like Groundhog Day. A leader of the council standing up and telling us that he's been talking to the MPs at Hampshire and making a special pleading to government. And you have to ask the question, how many times do you bang your head against the wall before you conclude that it is an utter waste of time? The change that we need will have to be a change of government. The government that we have at the moment does not really understand the value of public services. A government that demonises homeless people, a government that thinks removing a cap on bankers' bonus is a priority, a government that in the King's speech once again fails to do anything about a sustainable future for adult social care. No measures in there once again. A government that ignores the mental health issues that sees autistic people in inappropriate mental health facilities. They are not listening to us. I've no confidence they'll listen to us in the future. And we have a very sad situation that we're in. One of the great regrets for me is that I like to think of this as being a sort of a democratic institution in which the opposition members like me can offer an alternative. But the reality is, there really is no alternative left. If the most professional officers of this council can't find any more ways of making savings without getting to a cliff edge in terms of our budget, then what chance have we as ordinary members got? I'm sorry, I think it's been a really good debate, but ultimately a very depressing one, because nothing will change as a result of anything that's been said today. And finally, I just want to say a small tribute to my friend Councillor Kendall, because he's made a really good point about the adult social care side of things. I think we are moving towards a situation where there really is a risk that by cutting and cutting and cutting, there will be a real risk to the quality of services that we deliver to the most vulnerable people in Hampshire. And as a county councillor, that has a greater priority for me than balancing books. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of observations that I'd like to make. None of us really want these budget cuts, but unfortunately they are necessary. And I congratulate the officers for the sterling work that they have done in putting together a very good paper. If we look at some of our boroughs in the area, let's start with Eastleigh, shall we? Holton Heath, £148 million spend, £330,000 in interest every month, rising. A development that is built or proposed to be built in the middle of a floodplain full of mud. Eastleigh itself, £500 million in the hole. Then let's look at the other Liberal-run council in the area. Gosport, a Criterion Theatre, which has recently been purchased, I understand, for £600,000. In the meantime, Gosport residents are not having their bins collected regularly. How can we, in all honesty, listen to the Liberal Democrats or take their advice? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. And I just wanted to acknowledge 2 points raised by Councillor Kendall and indeed Councillor Harrison around adult social care. And I'm fully aware that adult social care creates the most significant pressure on our budget as a consequence of the growth in numbers of our ageing population, the complexity of mental health challenges, and our residents' needs in general. Our greatest challenge will be to protect our most vulnerable adults and children and to mitigate the impact of SP25 on age and disability. I wanted to, as many of the members of the HASC under Councillor Withers will know, I just wanted to acknowledge our diligent and dedicated staff who work so flexibly to deliver cost-effective services and for their robust commissioning of all our contracts. And there's some silver lining if you read the details of the proposals. Our partnership working, for example, with the NHS is second to none. We are reducing waiting list pressure by our step-up and step-down care facilities, which are fantastic. I visited them recently, and I urge you to do so if you get a chance. An obvious thing, but our reuse and recycling of equipment purchased by disabled facility grants, such as stair lifts and hoists, many of those have been thrown away in the past. Actually, they're perfectly usable and can be reused with a significant saving attached. Our innovative and pioneering use of automation and technology, and our support for independent supported living for disabled adults, rather than forcing them to live in residential care. We have created a new in-house Hampshire County Council care service for younger adults, and this means that we don't have to commission work from the independent, more expensive sector. Again, you know, a nod to Councillor Kendall's point on the quality that we can deliver more cost effectively is really important here. So whilst none of us want to reduce our services, we must really acknowledge the high standard of professional care offered by Hampshire County Council staff for Hampshire County Council residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Councillor Adams-King.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think listening to Councillor House, you might think that we hadn't carried out any form of innovation whatsoever, and the reason for that was that we'd not dipped into reserves as the opposition members might have liked us to in previous times. And I wanted to come back and reflect that actually there's an enormous amount of innovation going on, and particularly in our area where we're looking at different sorts of trials for thermal patching of our roads. Quicker, cheaper, more cost effective, most importantly, and also more environmentally friendly. The way in which we manage highways, the way in which our teams are now going out and not just fixing one pothole, but looking at the others around it. The way in which we are looking at the reuse of the items that we take from the road. Our roads are the quarries of tomorrow. We contribute to our climate change action plan by doing so, and we reduce our carbon emissions at the same time. So all of that's going on and all of that's happening whilst we still are in a position of severe financial strain. And the thing to remember, all of us, is that we have at least choices still at the moment. If we took the 114 route and the commissioners came in, none of us would have choices. They would simply cut everything back to the statutory minimum. And I am determined, as part of this consultation, that we will offer choices in terms of the different items on the universal services. We are looking at the school crossing patrols, as I've told you. It's not a matter of simply cutting 190. It's a matter of making sure that our children get to school safely. We will, to mention the concerns of Councillor Parker-Jones, be looking at community transport in a holistic way, because there is no point robbing Peter to pay Paul, as she rightly says. We need to think about the impacts that might have, both on social isolation, on the issues of health and well-being of our older people, and also on the impact of the travel to school budget, as we might push children from bus services into that bracket. But the one thing that I would say is that we create those options, and we create those options as a consequence of the prudent financial management of this administration and of previous ones. Had we been tapping into our reserves in the way that oppositions may have wished us to in the past, we wouldn't be here now. We would not have those options. We would not have the ability to look at different ways of doing things as we go forward. And the one thing that I am certain of, because of the dedication and hard work of the team in Universal Services, that we will be offering those options, and we will still be looking for innovation as we go through the next 2 years. And God willing, there will be a point at which we can really begin to invest once again in the services that we offer our residents in a way that I know all of us, regardless of party, would like. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Adams-King. Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Adams-King can be forgiven for not understanding the truth about our position on reserves because he wasn't on the County Council when those issues are being discussed. Councillor Kendall, of course, can't be forgiven. He chooses to rewrite history. Chairman, I'd like to congratulate the leader and support him for his honesty and sincerity in trying to tackle this issue with government. And he has our full support in trying to do that. There's no doubt that the root of this problem lies at government level now. A couple of years of post-2008 crash austerity at national level was needed to stabilise the national financial situation. But unfortunately, a group of MPs who got the taste of making cuts just couldn't stop themselves, and 13 years later it's still going on. Theresa May said austerity has ended. I'm still waiting to see that. But Chairman, what I really want to address is the responsibility you as Conservative councillors have for the position that we are now in. 25 years ago, opposition members in this chamber told you that if you didn't treat seriously the need to do better on highway maintenance, the day would come when we would see countless potholes and our highways falling apart. You laughed at us. You ridiculed what we said, but it has come home to roost just as we told you it would. You had 5 years of no increase in council tax. 5 years, zero increase. Very popular, great for getting votes, great for short-term political gain, but the compound impact of that now means we are in a far worse position than we would have been. You could have gone for a low council tax increase, or you could have gone for fewer than 5 years. But you chose, no, 5 years in a row, we'll do that. What do we get instead? Now looking for every possible way of stealth taxing we can, looking at tip charges and very poor services all around. You could have done something to make it less bad than it is. And Hampshire MPs, where are they? It's been said by a lot already. Silence. There's no feeling that our Hampshire MPs are battling for us, that they're doing something about it. And you are the troops that go out and get them elected. You're the ones that go out campaigning in a general election to get these people who've let Hampshire down re-elected. I hope you will think about that when you come to the next general election. And I won't even touch on Suella. Chairman, Councillor Tree picked up on the Conservative jibe that the Liberal Democrat group are not putting forward an alternative budget today. And he repeated that jibe. There is no amendment today that can solve this crisis. We all know that across all parties. It's gone too far and it's in the hands of government. I think we all understand that. So we have to do what we have to do. We will not support those cuts because they're cuts that you have created. And I will be voting against the third recommendation. But I tell you, Councillor Tree,
There is no whip telling Lib Dems how to vote. We will vote with our consciences, and I'm confident that every Lib Dem here will vote against option 3, but it will be because they choose to do so. So don't say we have a whip telling us what to do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Collett, for those comments. Councillor James.
Thank you, and I do have some empathy with the Leader of the Council for having to impose what are terrible cuts. I also have a lot of sympathy for our staff. Most of them do this as a vocation. This isn't a career move you make because you want to earn lots of money. You do it because you're passionate about protecting the most vulnerable. And unfortunately, they're going to struggle to do that, and that takes away a lot of the joy the job brings them. So I feel sorry for them, and I wish we could do more to prevent them having to face the falling standards of service that we'll inevitably have to provide. But Councillor Drew and Councillor Rod Cooper both made comments about how they didn't want to make these cuts. They were awful cuts. So it is worth just reflecting on why we are where we are. It is a Conservative government. And we've lobbied, and for the last 5-6 years, we've read these council papers. We will lobby central government to do something about it. And often lobby our MPs. I remember it's 2018 where the joke was made about the difference between what the DUP got for propping up Theresa May's government versus the 11 Tory MPs from Hampshire. So we know for 5 years we've been lobbying our Conservative MPs to do more to help us as a local authority be the kind of provider services we want to provide. So I thought I would check on how the 3 Conservatives covering Basingstoke and Deane are doing with that. So first of all, I went on to Hansard and I looked to see how many times, I've forgotten his name, Kit Malthouse, Maria Miller and Ranil Jayawardena had made a contribution in Parliament to warn the government of the crisis facing this authority. I'm pleased to say they all were joint on absolutely 0 mentions of our plight. But of course, that's Parliament, that's not where MPs hang out, so I went onto Twitter. And I went back and I went through their Twitter feeds, did a quick search to see how many times they've raised the issue of Hampshire County Council funding. Now, Kit Malthouse is an interesting and varied Twitter feed. He's unfortunately not found the space to mention the plight of this authority. He has, however, found time to mention the quality of the water in the River Mersey, which obviously I don't think runs through Test Valley. I will check, but he's obviously found time to do that, but not mention our plight. So I then looked at Ranil Jayawardena, who's a very busy man doing lots of touring with, he's a fanboy of Liz Truss. He's trying to get rid of lots of Trust in Trust T-shirts are in his garage, if anyone's interested. He's found a lot of time, in fact almost daily, to tweet support for what he believes to be the most vulnerable, and that is the 3% that have to pay inheritance tax, and he's fighting hard for them. No mention of Hampshire County Council. So I then went on to Maria Miller's tweet. Now, Maria Miller has a disadvantage because she's one of those MPs that really is reliant on someone else telling her what to think. So there wasn't an awful lot on there apart from a new hospital, which he's been banging on about for about 13 years. So there's been no mention at all from our MPs in 5 years since we've been asking them to give us some support. So I think, and I urge all my colleagues opposite, because I've not got a great history of helping Conservative MPs, but I know many in this chamber do, but you should take the view that if you can't help the most vulnerable in your divisions, you shouldn't be helping any vulnerable Conservative MPs at the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor McAvoy.
Right. Thank you very much, Chairman. I do understand, obviously, that this council needs to find savings. I think perhaps we could start by cutting back on the burgeoning projects in this council that seem to focus on the woke agenda and the climate change scam. However, it is the cut to the school crossing patrols that concerns me the most. Most of us are parents and grandparents, and of course we're all corporate parents, and the precious lives of our youngsters are too valuable to put at risk if we go ahead with this penny-pinching cut. However, I do hope that they can look at it again. I'd also like to pay tribute to the school crossing patrols in the South Waterside, and in particular those in Blackfield and in Holbury, who I see regularly and who turn out in all weathers. They care about our local children. Do I support this budget? Well, what choice do I have? As usual, there is no alternative from the opposition, and I heard Councillor Collett referring to 25 years ago about asking for dipping into reserves. I too was here 25 years ago, and if we'd done that then, there wouldn't be anything left at all. And I do agree this is really the government's fault. Nevertheless, I will support this budget because I actually don't have any alternative. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McAvoy. And now what I believe is the last question, Councillor Wade.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Well, members, it's a bit deja vu, really. This time of year, we're along the road of we've got to make cuts. The government hasn't given us enough money. The leader is going to speak to the MPs. But we've been down this road year after year. The problem is we're running out of road. We're at the last throw of the dice, and it's not going to come up right for us. I have no doubt that the Hampshire MPs, that the majority of you have helped got elected, have done nothing to help this council. And the reason being that, because we haven't got the money to support it. Now, I can feel a level of sorry for you, because the problem you're facing is a Conservative government and you're a majority of Conservatives. You don't want to seem disloyal to your party and complain and the rest of it. But members, the people we should really be caring about most of all are the people of Hampshire. Now, I've seen these cuts. I've seen in children's services, adult services, roads. Our roads are nearly third world in certain places. It's not because the officers haven't doing their job properly. We've got excellent officers. And I actually feel very sorry for them. They put their heart and soul into delivering the best service for Hampshire County Council they can. But the politicians that are supporting them are not supporting them the way they should. The MPs in Hampshire have done nothing. They're only interested in getting re-elected. You may think about that when they want you to deliver their leaflets and knock on doors for them, because they're going to want you to do that very shortly, because they're going to be in a bit of a sticky situation. And I feel sorry for the leader, because he's doing his best, but he's got to fight his own party. So you've got one hand behind your back and one eye shut, metaphorically speaking. The reality is, you are part of the problem because your party has put this council in a situation when it can't fund its services. What about the children that need support in education? The children that need support in looked after children, cared for, that have issues that come to our children's services? What about the adults that are in our care homes that we're thinking, because they haven't got dementia and they're not coming out of hospital, we can't support them anymore? What about all the services that we have that the people of Hampshire need for the sick, the old, and the vulnerable? And I'm not going to talk about policy, I'm going to talk about the people that are in every one of our divisions that need help, because you will have them. And when can you look them in the eye and say, we've done everything we possibly can to maintain the support that you need? Can you really do that? You're supporting the government that's stopping us having the money to do it. No, you can't. There's a conflict there. I understand the conflict you have, but you can't, the two don't marry up. You can't say you've done everything if you support the people that are causing the problem. This council, I'm proud to be a county council. I think this is a great council. It's got fantastic officers and some great services. But it's imploding because it hasn't got the financial support to deliver them. I can't support this because I can't support anything that disadvantages the sick, the vulnerable, the old, the young, and the needy in Hampshire that need our help and support. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I had anticipated that would be the last speaker, but someone else has just indicated that they wish to speak, and I'm expecting this to be the last speaker, the last person to speak. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, thank you, and thank you for letting me say a few words. I'm not going to talk about the savings in general, and I'm not going to talk about some of the Liberal Democrats' vague recollections of their alternative budget when they have bothered to put one forward in the past, because I think we've all had a lot to say, and there's been lots of people who've got their own little political digs in. But what I do want to perhaps conclude our general bit before the leader sums up is to perhaps end on a slight note of optimism, because I think it is, in this discussion of how difficult it is, and in this discussion of making the difficult choices that at least Conservatives will today, I'm sure, vote to make, rather than those who say they have no other option but then choose to vote against it. There is still that glimmer of optimism, and that's still that bit that actually we can improve the lives of our most vulnerable residents. And, this is a really strange one, sometimes you can do that while delivering a saving at the same time. And I want to just say a little bit here about how the work that our officers, and it is the amazing work of our dedicated and skilled officers that allow us to do this, the work our officers are doing to continue to transform how we deliver our exceptional children's services. And members, we all know from our involvement, our work as corporate parents, but actually, where it is safe to do so, the best outcome for children is by keeping them in a home, whether that's a direct parent or whether that's a wider family member. But the best way, the best outcomes are delivered by keeping children within their home whenever possible. And within our savings programme, there is a £600,000 saving in children's services. I'm sure many members will have wanted to look at that in detail, because that is an area where we have always said that we work hard to prioritise our investment. But that is one of those true savings. It's a saving where, by changing how you deliver the services, by continuing to lead the way, as the Hampshire Children's Services has done for some years now, actually you can deliver better outcomes for young people and children, and you can save money. So while we're talking about many of the savings and decisions that are difficult for us to make, I did just want to touch on that last one, where actually I believe over the next 2 years we will continue to transform our services, and we will continue to deliver better outcomes for Hampshire's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heron. We've had a total of 15 speakers who wanted to talk about this particular paper this morning. So I think we've given the paper a report, a very good airing. I'm now going to call upon the Leader of the Council to reply to the debate.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. And as you say, we've had a full and thorough debate, and I thank all colleagues in the House for that. A couple of bits I will pick up. A lot I'm going to say has been spoken about by my Conservative colleagues. Certainly in terms of the lobbying, as I said in my opening remarks, the letter that we sent along with Kent made a significant difference to the outcomes we had in the autumn statement. So it wasn't a waste of time, and it did add value, and I've been asked about that many times, and we've approached various people telling us that it made that difference, and it did actually help with our social care budget. So I don't accept that it is a waste of time. I also will say, in terms of our MPs, actually I don't agree about what was said about Ranald Jayawardene, our MP. He has made supporting statements in the House about the difficulties in terms of children's services and the funding, and therefore supporting us from Hampshire County Council by raising that at issue. And I do know one or two of our other MPs have also made announcements in the House supporting us. Over some of those meetings we've had over recent months and previously, we have sat down and spoken to them, laying out very clearly what those issues are, where the pressures are, and actually spoken to them about how can they help us. And very often that has been about through policy. And I know they have been doing a lot of lobbying work on policy and those things that we talk about in home to school transport. So yes, could more be done? Absolutely. but our MPs have actually been helping us. And as I said to you, I was going to write, well, we are going to write to the Chancellor and the Secretary of State probably the following week after I've had my meeting on Monday with the MPs. And this time the response was, well, how can we help you with that and that lobbying? So they do understand it. And yes, it is lobbying, but that's what we've got to do. But what they're doing this now, they're doing it collectively, and I think that is the difference. And I understand the pressures are under. We all understand that the government have significant pressures on and what they've got to deal with and their budgets as well. So what we are trying to do, making sure we balance our budget, which we have to do, but also my job and all our job is to look after the most vulnerable in society in Hampshire. So our children and our elderly residents. And that's what we will do. And that's why you've heard a couple of my Cabinet colleagues talking about, we're looking at those savings and those proposals in our budget, but how can we mitigate some of that and the way we address that through those consultations? Now, I know always the opposition has a job to do. And I was, when Councillor House was talking, I think he gave me, what was it, a B-, I think he gave me. But I was thinking that, you know, we all look forward in the House to your sound financial advice as a leader of Eastleigh. And we write that, and I'm giving you a D- on that, Councillor House. Excuse me, Councillor House, I'm talking, I didn't interrupt you. It was a D-. I'm afraid I even, you know, thought about, could I go any lower? But I wasn't sure what was below that, actually. But I understand as a leader of the opposition you have to do that. I think making all your comments about, you know, previous sort of members of Parliament or leaders, you know, I don't understand that. This is about, as quite often a few of our members have said, this is about the local politics and what we're doing, not the local politics. Well, I suppose it is in terms of how we manage that and how we manage our budgets as well. And it is difficult. I've not shied away from that. Every time I've stood up and said how difficult it is. None of us want to be in that position, but we do our best to manage that. What I would really like to say, and several people have mentioned this in terms of our officers, I said in my opening remarks again, ourselves as members and officers don't come into this to deliver less services. And a few of you made those sort of comments. And they have done an absolutely amazing job. Sometimes it's just easier to say that, but it comes from the heart. I know how hard they work. And can I say, with the executive and our cabinet members as well, we went through every single department or directorate, sat down and went through every detail within those departments. And the directors and the assistant directors and members of their teams with the relevant cabinet members have spent hour after hour after hour going through that. And I agree with Councillor House, not doing that salami slicing. That's why we changed that approach. So the change of approach that we have taken has led us to this position where we are doing the absolute best we can. But I want to be clear, as I said, I've never shied away from the difficulties we have, and it is an issue for all of us. And I think in the House, we all know that we will do the very best we can for the most vulnerable in our society, all residents that need that help and support. And that's what we do the focus on. It does disappoint me when sometimes opposition members focus on the things. We have to put everything in our paper. You all know that, that's what we have to do. But we've been very clear, and Councillor Nick Adams-King made that very clear. We now look at those stage 2 consultations about how we can mitigate some of that, how we can still provide that service. It's a challenge, and it is a significant challenge, but we're up for that challenge, not only with the officers, but with my cabinet and colleagues as well. So, Madam Chairman, I've been very open and honest about that. We have further meetings with our MPs. We will continue to do that and support and work with them to achieve the best outcome we can for Hampshire. So, Madam Chairman, thank you, and I move the paper, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. Now, members, we turn to the recommendations, which are on pages 17 and 18 of your documents. And I am aware that there will be some people who wish to abstain or some people who wish to object. So please bear with me. So with that in mind, I'm going to take each recommendation singly and separately. So the first recommendation, A, that the Q1 report on Treasury Management activity at Appendix C of your document be accepted. Are you agreed or not? Would you please raise your hands just so that we can get an overall view? All right. Thank you very much, everyone. It seemed to be agreed unanimously. Recommendation number, the second recommendation B, that delegated authority for the Director of Corporate Operations in consultation with the leader and Chief Executive to allocate up to £5 million from the Invest to Save reserve to support directorates in implementing their SP25 proposals. Are we agreed or not agreed? Please show of hands. Can get your hands raised for a second, please. Thank you very much. Now, the third proposal, the third recommendation, C, I will read and then I will make a reference to what Councillor House said earlier this afternoon. C is the savings proposals in Appendix 2, subject to further consultation and executive decision making where necessary. Now, before we vote on that, earlier today, Councillor House indicated that he would be seeking a recorded vote. Is that correct? Right. If that is correct, Councillor House, you know the procedure. We need 10 or more members to stand and request a recorded vote. Right.
I think we've got to.
Yes. You may now be seated. Thank you. You may now be seated. Right. So, members, it's clearly been indicated that this will be a recorded vote on recommendation C only, which is on page 18 of your papers, and this will soon be showing on your big screens. I hope. I believe... Sorry?
Just confirm it's open.
Yeah, the members, you seem to be voting already, but the vote is open. Have to wait 90 seconds. Do you think that's 90 seconds?
I don't think so, not yet.
No. Members, I have to wait 90 seconds to ensure everyone has voted.
I'd probably just give it until, give it another 20 seconds. I think you're just about there now. I think it's
Right.
I think everyone's...
Members, I think the 90 seconds is up. I think the screens vote for themselves. 60% in favour, 29% against, with one abstention. So with that, the proposal, the recommendation is accepted. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Now, that brings me to a very important item, which talks about lunch. We are just after 1 o'clock, 1:05, despite what this clock up here says. We still have a further 4, I think it is, items to go through. Are you agreed that you will wish to continue with the meeting? Is there anyone who feels very strongly that we should have a break? No? Right, thank you. That being the case, we will proceed. We will proceed with item 10. Item 10 is a statement of community involvement, and I'm going to invite the leader to present the report. Councillor Humby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This report for you is seeking approval of proposed updates to the adopted Hampshire Statement of Community Involvement. This development plan document must be updated every 5 years and sets how the County Council will involve consultees and interested parties in the preparation of local plan documents and planning applications. The key changes are listed within the report. I move the recommendation, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Is there any debate? Therefore, are you agreed the recommendations on page 813? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 11. I'm not sure who's introducing item 11. Is it yourself? Right. Item 11 is Councillor North to present the paper.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is our usual item for ratification by full council. The Independent Remuneration Panel's report link is included in your agenda pack, and the recommendations are listed on page 877. They were approved, unchanged and unanimously by the Employment in Hampshire County Council Committee, and that's reflected in the update paper. And they stand here before you today, members, for your approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Is there any debate? Are the recommendations agreed? Just say agreed. Okay. Item 12 of the agenda, I'm going to invite Councillor Forster to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are some procedural changes for the Constitution, and hopefully I can do a quick intro without delaying lunch. SACRE supports local authority in the provision of religious education and collective worship in school. It's governed by its own constitution, and in July this year agreed some proposed changes to the Constitution through a task and finish group. That's what's in this document. The second item is the Education Advisory Panel, which advises members on educational outcomes of children and young people. To provide wider development opportunities for members, the County Council is asked to approve an amendment to the terms of reference to remove the restrictions on the appointment of the panel's chairman. Having looked through this in some detail, and the recommendations or the proposals come from the two groups, I'm happy to present them to Council for approval of these two recommendations as detailed.
Thank you to Councillor Forster for that detailed introduction to the paper. Are there any questions? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Forster, for that quick explanation. I'd just like to draw members' attention to section 3.11 under collective worship in the report. I'll give you a couple of seconds to get that up on your screen. It states that the Education Act of 1996 requires the SACRE to advise on matters relating to religious worship in schools where collective worship comes into its remit, and lays down a requirement that all schools hold a daily active collective worship, and that this should be wholly or mainly of a broadly Christian character. Madam Chairman, I'd like to draw your attention also to the latest census statistics. More people in my area of Havant now identify as having no religion, now at 47.4%, up from 32% back in 2011. Christianity has decreased by 14% also in that time, and is now lower than the no religion response. So essentially people in our area, residents that we represent, on the whole are becoming less religious, and atheism is the largest category we now have. Given this information, will the relevant executive member, Councillor Forster, consider it appropriate to write to the Secretary of State for Education, urging them to amend the decades-old Education Act to change this default position and to reflect a 21st century, more diverse and modern society? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Forster.
Thank you for the question. As someone who's Jewish, I am still supportive of this. I'll certainly take your comments into consideration, but I'm not sure I necessarily agree with them. But I'll take it into consideration, discuss with officers and colleagues, and we'll then determine whether to take that idea forward.
We have another question. Councillor Donnelly.
It's not so much a question, Madam Chair, as a contribution. I don't know if that's appropriate now or...
That comes under debate.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Porter.
Thank you, and it's on a very similar basis to that of Councillor Baines. But humanism is a practice of, I won't say religion, it's a belief and moral attitude. It has some high-standing public figures such as Professor Jim Al-Khalili, who are humanists, and many others. Many people describe themselves as atheists because they don't know about humanism, and it's something that I've raised with Councillor North before. I'd like that to be included as one of the additions to the Sacre conversation that has just been taking place. I realise that Councillor Forster has his own religion, and of course we fully represent the principle that everyone has a right to their religion, but if people have a right to the religion of humanism, if it can be described in that way, then I think it should be included in the Sacre papers and in the process. So I'd like that added, please, into the point that Councillor Baines made.
Councillor Forster?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a question there.
Sorry, my
briefly,
request
could you-
is that actually the principle of humanism as being one of the measures that's never actually added into any data, because it's never actually asked, but if that could be considered as part of the conversation within the, or the request back to the Secretary of State, please.
Thank you for that question. This isn't relevant to this paper, which is asking for changes to the Constitution on points that were raised by the two committees. So we'll take that offline. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Right, we're now going to debate. Councillor Donnelly, sorry, I beg your
Oh, that's
pardon,
okay, don't
Donnelly.
worry about it. Thank you. I just would like to, as Vice Chair of Sacre, just expand on the point. Common worship is obviously required by all schools, but there is quite a wide measure of discretion as to what form that takes. So, for example, if you have a population which has a higher proportion of one faith than another, then we have the ability to change that upon an application. We did have an application for common worship on no faith. We considered that extremely carefully, but ultimately you can't worship something if you have no faith. I'm a strong defender of common worship. I think religion and faith groups are under attack on a daily basis, and I wouldn't want to see any other efforts to muscle the role of our faith communities out of our wider conversation. The second thing I would say regarding the humanism is that humanism has been part of the Living Difference curriculum for the last 15 or 20 years, and we have a humanist representative co-opted. The changes which are made to the Constitution, I did not support them, and I know that some of my other councillors did not support them on the grounds that we do not believe that humanism is a faith, and that this should be a space for discrete faith religious education. Humanism belongs in philosophy. However, the Humanist Society recently took Kent County Council to court, and they've been taking quite a few local authorities to court on the basis that if they did not include a humanist representative, they would go by the legal route. And we were advised by the legal officers that we had to basically appoint a humanist representative. So we've let it go through. On the legal advice, we're not entirely happy with it, but there we go. I hope that puts just a little bit more meat in the bones of this report. Thank you.
For your comments, are there any other councillors who... Oh, Councillor Glenn.
Yes, it's an interesting discussion, this, and it's worthy of a debate. And frankly, before any letters are written, let me start at the beginning. I'm completely open-minded about people's faith. Completely open-minded. In fact, I'm not even Church of England myself. I'm a Presbyterian. But that doesn't make me want to write a letter all of a sudden to the Secretary of State or whoever. I would like to see, before that happens, I'd like to see a debate. I certainly would like to see scrutiny on it. I think it's worthy of scrutiny before anything's written, because frankly, we haven't had our opinions shared yet. We've had somebody put it forward, quite rightly. We've had an executive member say, and he mentioned his own religion, quite rightly, and he would consider it and maybe write a letter, but I would certainly, before anything's written to anybody, like to discuss it with the County Council, and if it's not done that way, certainly it's worthy of scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. Councillor Chad.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'm just going to take the liberty here with my Cabinet colleagues that maybe, can I make the suggestion that at some point maybe the SACRE do a report to the Children and Young People Select Committee of their work that they do for our schools?
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Drew.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It always struck me that whenever I went along to watch the religious, broadly Christian service at schools, that they took a lot of time to reflect on all of the religions, and particularly a lot of the events, Diwali, Eid, and of course Lent, and they take into account all of the religions. And of course, as many of you will know, there is a chapter in the Quran called Miriam, or Mary, and that deals with the birth of Christ. So all of the religions have one God, although those the major religions, and quite rightly, they're reflected in our schools so that children get an understanding of the broad spectrum of religions and religious beliefs, which I think is a good thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drew. Councillor Still.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am the chairman of SACRE. It's an amazing committee. It's very diverse. I suggest maybe you'd like to come along one day and listen to our committee and see what they have to say. That Councillor Baines there, he was vice chairman until he jumped ship. So he's now no longer vice chairman, but I hear what you say. I take on board, I really appreciate what Councillor Chad has said, and I think that's a perfect way forward for us to what you put forward for us to come along. But honestly, you must come along, sit down and listen to what we have to say at our committee. It's a very friendly committee. We've all got different ideas, but we all pull together, and that's the way it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Still. Councillor Parker-Jones.
Thank you. I wanted to say how pleased I was when I went back and looked at the last minutes of SACRE that there was a humanist present, co-opted. I'm not quite sure how you choose your humanist. I think it's hugely important that humanism is an option and that people understand the philosophy of humanism. It isn't a religion. Definitely not. Most certainly 100% not a religion. But it is a way to express your opinion and your place in your world. I am really pleased that the humanisms took Kent to court, and I'm really pleased that they won. So I will be coming along to SACRE because I would like to know how humanism will be fully incorporated by this council going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Jones. Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that I welcome the scrutiny that was mentioned. I think it's a really good idea to make sure that it's scrutinised. It was just the comment from the chair of the committee that kind of just hit me then. You know, we sit in the chamber and we argue about politics and who's on what side. And then even when the chair stands up and says, I chair this meeting and isn't it great? And then has a dig about jumping ships. I think, isn't it pathetic? You know, can't we just actually all agree on things and actually have it out in the open and scrutinise it? You know, it's just such a shame that at every opportunity that somebody can have a dig, they do.
Right, is that Councillor Andrew Joy? Sorry, Andrew Joy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't want to prolong the debate on this, so I will be very brief. It's been many years since I actually attended SACRE. I was on SACRE actually when I was first elected and was on that for a couple of years. And subsequently, I became, on behalf of the County Council, the chair of the Hampshire Interfaith Network. That doesn't exist as such anymore because I was, if you like, the architect of actually moving the responsibility for interfaith education specifically from the County Council to, in fact, the community, the faith community itself. I think that was the right thing to do. But the point is, we as a County Council have always had a very strong interest in children's education and supporting of the Education Act, as it is in allowing for faith and worship as part of education to be there. Now, I can tell you that as far as faith is concerned, humanism is not in there. But we, as an authority, have over many years, but not recently, have actually had an interfaith calendar competition and so on, which a good many of you have actually sort of have come to in the past. And I know that Councillor Chad, who actually led on this for a number of years, and I worked with her on that. This is actually something which is so easy for us all to agree on because we've already committed to actually the opportunity to attend Sacre, to take an interest in this. This isn't something which is actually worthy of debate and competition and a political position. This is a complete no-brainer. So I will support this, and I suggest we all do.
Thank you. I have received no further indications that anyone else wishes to contribute to this debate. Therefore, I'm going to ask you to turn to the recommendations on page 880 of your document. And given that there is obviously some feeling in some quarters about whether or not humanism should or should not be included, I'm going to take the two recommendations separately, and I'm also going to ask for a show of hands in case anyone decides they wish to abstain or object. Right, so the first recommendation, A, is that the County Council approve the updated constitution for Hampshire's Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education as agreed by the Advisory Council at their meeting on the 4th of July 2023 and contained in the annex to this report. Would you please indicate if you agree that recommendation? Thank you very much. Agreed. The second recommendation, B, that the County Council approve the proposed changes to the Education Advisory Panel's terms of reference as detailed in Appendix 6 to this report. Please indicate whether you agree. Right, I think, but just to be on the safe side, could I just ask the officer in front whether or not they are... Did you get a clear count then? Yeah. Well, it might be better if we do a show of hands for those who object to those who will not be supporting recommendation B. Right, those of you who will be abstaining? Right, I think that the majority have agreed. So that recommendation is carried.
Can't hear you, Chair.
Sorry. We are now on to part 2, item 13 on the agenda. 13A, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. No questions have been received on that, so we can proceed immediately to their report, which is 13B, and I'm going to ask Councillor Vaughan to present the report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no further input on the report, and I am happy to accept questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Those of us that have been around a long time will remember when the Fire Authority was part of the County Council. It was a whole committee along with waste disposal under the heading of public protection. And there was a lot that we discussed to do with the Fire Authority. Can the Chair of the Authority please explain why there is so little ever to report to the County Council?
Councillor Vaughan.
Have you read the report? Yes. Do you read the reports that come in?
I don't read all the reports that go to your authority.
No, but they come here. I mean, they're quite full, and they're quite fulsome. Last time I gave a state of the situation report about what the fire services condition is in. So reports do come through. What more would you want?
I just have to remind members that this is not necessarily a question and answer session. can I ask Councillor Collett that if he wishes to take this further, that you do it offline with Councillor Vaughan, all right? We are simply here to note the report today, not to make any decisions. So with that, I'm just going to accept that the report has been received and noted, and thank you, Councillor Vaughan, for presenting it. I'm going to move on to item 14, which is the Executive Lead Members for Children's Service for Children's Services. Councillor Heron, if you would like to present your report.
Chairman, thank you. I'm afraid there was an error with that report, and that used to be my colleague, Councillor Forster, introducing this one.
Thank you. Councillor Forster.
Thank you. The report is self-explanatory, and I'm happy to move it as written.
Questions? Debate? Thank you, Councillor Forster. The report is noted. And does that also apply to question 14B? Councillor Forster again, please.
Yes.
I take it he has presented the report. You have read it. Questions? Debate? Thank you very much, Councillor Forster. Your report has been received and noticed. I'm also at this point going to thank everyone in this chamber, including the public gallery, for being so very tolerant this morning. It has gone along a long time. I know you must be hungry, but we have had some good questions and we have had good debate, and that is what democracy is all about. So I thank you so much for attending, and I think we can now stop the video. And I hope you all enjoy a very late lunch. Thank you.